Hello, since PBK isn't streaming, I figured I would have a just chatting stream if anybody is interested. Otherwise, I am going to sit here and eat my avocado sandwiches. So should I do mukbang or should I mute my microphone? I think I'm going to mute my microphone. Teo did a discussion earlier, and I haven't listened to it. I think I'm going to put that on. Where was that?
Thank you all for joining. We've got quite a few. We've got a little. Let's fix that. Yeah, thanks for joining, man. This has been a long time coming. Zarina has been on this channel before. She was part of our conversation. We had a conversation on, I think it was feminism because she's a rational female. But today we want to speak about the spiritual health of London and to sort of lay the groundwork. Zarina and I met at Speakers Corner, and in the description I described Speakers Corner as an arena where spiritual battle takes place. And I've got a little clip to show you guys to sort of give you a underground POV of what happens and what speakers going on. Maybe just, yeah, it's quite loud, so speakers, headphones warning.
Are you right with me?
There's only so much of that I can take. As David Walker says, it looks healthy. Yeah, that style of conversation is frequent as speakers going on. However, you also do get amazing people like that conversation with. And with no further ado, let me bring up my guest, Zarina. Hi, Zarina.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Thank you so much for bringing me on here today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you both online and in person. And yes, for those who don't know, I'm Zoe Master, aka the Rational Female, and I talk on my channel about problems of feminism and how it's really destroying gender roles. And this is, video that I put up last night, actually, which Teo has watched. In that video, I was talking really about how, because seeing as in this video, you and I are going to be talking about preserving the spiritual health of London, and I would say also mainly the entirety of the West. I think the main thing that we must do really is fight for the preservation of gender roles, and that's something I'd love to talk about with you in this video. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff like gender, sexuality, addiction, and how it all links to spirituality.
We'll definitely touch on all those good stuff. But I'm going to steal a question from my favorite podcast, which is called The Sacred. And the question I think will set up a good frame for this conversation. I will answer the question as well, but I want you to go first. And the question is, what is sacred to you?
Well, the word sacred is such a beautiful word because the idea of something being sacred is something that is really, really precious. And actually, I can answer this quite well. So as you know, Teo, and for those of you who don't know, I am an author. And for me, writing and creativity and music and art, that is probably the most sacred and most precious thing to me. And about 2 months ago, I had a virus on my computer and my hard drive. I took everything off my hard drive and put it onto a USB. And for my writing, I use a program called Scrivener. And unfortunately, some of the files didn't all copy it. I don't know what happened. They got lost or they got corrupted, but I lost stories that I wrote when I was younger. And I didn't really properly think about it until I was going through my Scrivener documents and seeing what was there and what wasn't there. And I can't be able to explain how Scrivener works, but effectively, like, the full files, some of them were not there. And I was sitting in the library a couple of days ago, just looking at my computer and thinking about all the stories I lost. And I was really, really distraught. And I remember sitting there and I was actually felt like drinking because I used to have an alcohol problem when I was younger. And the reason I felt this way is because writing is such a sacred thing for me. For me, writing and art is sacred. And when something bad happens to something that we consider sacred, we can often feel this desire to act in a very self-destructive way. And I think this is very common with very artistic people, like a lot of writers, artists. Something bad happens to your work, your music, and you feel like, doing drugs or lashing out or even committing suicide. And this is so, so, so dangerous. So that's why I think, and this is why I've become increasingly aware of this year, and something we were taught about in AA, you cannot make something that is from this material world the most sacred thing above all. If I make writing the most sacred, most important thing in my life, that is very, very, very dangerous because that will then lead me to become obsessed, lead me to become, if anything bad happens to that, oh my God, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself. So what we were taught in Alcoholics Anonymous, and what I believe every religion teaches, and what's no doubt you as well, Teo, and most people watching TV, the most sacred thing in the world is a love of God and a higher power and a connection to the divine. Because when you place that above all else, what that means is that whenever something bad happens or something goes wrong, you can trust that everything is going to be fine. Because if you say, oh, my work is the most sacred thing, or even this person is the most sacred thing, that can all go at any point. Something being sacred has to be something that is beyond this physical world, and it has to be something that is beautiful, balanced, something you can trust and have faith in. And to me, that is God, and that is what God is.
Yeah, Chad, I'm listening at 1.5 speed. I could slow it down if people mind, but I didn't even know if people were watching. So if somebody wants to jump on and talk, I'm just watching this while I'm having breakfast.
Oh, that's beautifully answered. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jonathan Pageau, but there was Pageau.
Is that the psychologist?
He's an artist, orthodox, icon carver, comic book writer. Yeah, he's friends with Jordan Peterson, and he was at the ARC conference that they had in London this past a few weeks ago. And at that conference, Pageau gave a speech that tracks nicely with exactly what you've said, and it's the idea of taking the sacred out of the material and taking the sacred out of also individual gains and looking above, basically. So I think, yeah, that I agree that is the most sacred. But I'm gonna give a different answer, just for variety's sake. And I will say my younger siblings are sacred to me. It's the person that I stole the question from. She describes it as, "What's the thing that you would feel insulted if you were offered a lot of money for?" And that's a good test to see what is sacred to you. And obviously, my siblings are not worth any amount of money. So that's my answer. Going on from that, on the sacred theme, the topic is assessing the spiritual health of London. How long have you lived in London?
All my life, apart from when I was at university, I was in York for several months, and then I was in Guildford. I did kind of make contemporary music.
Nice.
So
And
when I was in Guildford, that's when I started going to outdoor. That completely changed my life.
talk to me about your experience of London in terms of the spiritual health of it, as before you went to Guildford, after you came back from university.
I think London is spiritually really, really bad. London is in a state of spiritual bankruptcy. The city is very, 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 very unhealthy. For those who don't know, and I'm going to try and be careful of how deep they're going to this.
Oh, Andre, I'm sorry. I called you Chad. Yeah, I wasn't paying attention to the things. Sorry.
There is a lot of very dark, malevolent practices done in the city. David Icke has spoken about this a lot. My brother is a huge Icke fan. Me and him talk about his videos and his work. And London is obviously a very, very, very old city. There are a lot of things that have been done in the city and to the city to effectively completely mess it up. Symbolic, that is. And I think that a lot of the bad things that have been done in the city, especially over the last few centuries or so, have really polluted the air. I mean, think about the idea of pollution. What is pollution? This idea of very ugly, dark, residual things all being trapped in the air. I had panic attacks for 7 years. I think that stress, anxiety, depression, mental illness, this is what happens. This is the most common thing in big cities. And it's funny because big cities were never supposed to be lived in. You know, a city like London was never supposed to be a place of residence. London was, for a long time, I'm a bit fuzzy on the dates, but for a long time, London was a place of, merchanting. That's where people come. They come to do business, right? You do your business, you do your trading. That's what London, and that's what cities were for. And, the Bank of England or the Bank of London, like there's this financial financial center in London. It's the Bank of England or the City of London, the actual City of London, when you have the banks and you have that. There is a lot of, we'll say, very evil stuff that is generated right here in London, where I live, where I was born, where I've lived my entire life. And when there are certain people who are practicing these certain things, spiritually, that is going to have a very bad effect on people. And that is why I say the only way to...
Wow. She thinks banking is spiritually evil. It's like...
not get sucked into these dark forces is to, find God. And it's interesting, Taylor, that you mentioned...
Hold on, let me just pick up.
And honestly, with Teo, when he said, what would you be offended if you got offered money for? Like, if you offered money for my cat or dog or my parents or my nephews or my sister, why would I be offended? Like, do I find the idea of selling these things offensive? Maybe not my cat or my dog. I mean, if honestly, Shadow, if somebody offered, I don't know, a really large amount, like $50. Honestly, I kind of like, if somebody's offering me money for Shadow, like, as long as it's not like to do horrible things, right? If I think this person just wants to take care of Shadow, I would be like, okay. But that's because that's a dog or a cat. Nobody's going to offer me anything for Happy. She's 11. She just turned 11. But is there any amount of money for which, like, the transaction is disgusting. It's disgusting. Like, the idea that somebody would make that type of transaction is disgusting. But why would I be offended? Like, it tells me more about that person than it tells, like, and it's like a silly idea. Like, okay, let's say you give me $50,000 and I give you my nephew. What does that mean? Like, is he going to stop being my nephew? Is he going to turn into being your nephew? No. So, like, I honestly think there's an underlying presumption of certain things about money that tells me more about the person who makes those presumptions, right? Like, it's just a category error. Like, how does money relate to my siblings? I have no dog. I have one sister, my sibling. Like, what is that relation? No idea.
Couple of few things that you put on the table there. You said there are a lot of dark things, a lot of dark things that's been done in London in the last few years.
Well, probably the last several centuries in particular, but if we just go with the last 100 years alone,
you mentioned the fact that it is the finance capital of Europe. I would say pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
So many banks.
The world.
So are you saying that the spirit of capitalism is that what you're pointing to as being polluting?
Well, people.
I mean,
say
I guess you could
capitalism, but
say New York
money is not an inherently bad thing. Generating wealth is not bad, and a lot of people like to blame capitalism. I have these people say this as well. Speakers Corner. The desire to generate wealth and make money is not a bad thing. Money itself is very, very neutral. Money can be very good, and money can also be very bad. It's not really money. It's the fact that these, we'll say, corporations or financial centers or whatever, they hoard wealth and they use and do certain things to exploit others. And the things that they do are how, you know that phrase, the rich stay rich, the poor stay poor. That's effectively how they do this. And London is one of the probably, I would say,
this idea of exploitation
in the
is
entire
just
world
so
where a lot of this stuff happens to such a high extent. And because a lot of people don't really understand this and they don't really understand how to break free from this, they don't know how to effectively get out and to, free themselves. And this doesn't have to be in any dramatic way. Just by, for example, as I was saying, have a history of, drinking, panic attacks, depression, just by connecting more to God, by praying, by, starting to do, perform acts of love, like do the things that you want to do, doing things that make you happy, striving for good moral character. All of these things can seriously stop you from living a spiritually bankrupt life. And I really do think that the reason why London is so spiritually unhealthy is because people are not living in accordance with their true divine spiritual selves. And this is how the whole system is set up this way. I mean, it's just awful. It's like right from birth, you're shoved into school, which is, our model of education is still based on the Industrial Revolution. This whole thing of getting people into school almost like they're in a factory. And basically, it's almost like, they get you in, they indoctrinate you, and then you're churned out into an office. I mean, what do most people do in London as well? Like, what is the biggest industry in London? It's finance, it's this, this very, very data techie, it's like the data techie hub of the world. And a lot of people, especially young men, they, like most men in London, most males in London work in these industries. And, a lot of women do as well, which kind of
I'm just watching it for the first time.
This is what the world is. It's all based around, working in these offices. It's almost like a prison.
Two things. What area you put that? Just to put a bow on the finance thing. What I'm getting from that is you're pointing to greed, and you're pointing to I think greed is probably the way I would put it. And there is the spiritual, all those buildings that you see of all those banks serve as temples to greed, is what you're saying. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'm going to say so. Yeah, greed. You think of greed, lust, envy.
Also, you started speaking about what it is like, so from cradle to grave, the system in which you're encouraged to participate in, and you say that's also spiritually bankrupt.
Right? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that has such a bad effect on people because if people, again, in London, if most young people, you're in your 20s as well, right?
The final stretch.
Well, we're both in our 20s, and it's like most people around our age group. Because, I know you, for example, you're very creative. You make documentaries.
Okay, I'm going to skip forward to when more people join.
And
just to tie it back to the spiritual health of London, assessing it. I'm not. I see everything you see. I see the sexual debauchery. I see the greed manifested in the giant banks, that's ugly buildings in London. I see the selfishness that don't we touch on it, but that's part of something that up north London is known for. It's no one says thank you. No one looks at you. Everyone's just go. So I see a lot of that. But I also do see the people like yourself, people like myself, who are seeking the idea of there not being a God is not even up for consideration. And I think as long as there are people seeking, blessed are those who seek and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. And I think if you're earnestly seeking, I believe you will end up on the path to Christ. But that's what I think. Thank you so much for joining, Zarina, man. This has been so much fun. I think we've got a lot more. There's a lot more meat on this bone, obviously. I don't think
we're in part 2
in London in an hour. But yeah, for part 2, you let me know when you're available. Let me see if anyone's gone. Is anyone joined? No, we're good. Did I even post a chat link? I don't think I did it. My bad. Sorry, lads. Sorry, guys. Now I've posted the link.
I mean, it really is. When we move society away from God, that's when really society crumbles. If everyone, as you said, could find and seek earnestly a path to connect to God and to connect to the divine, I think after that everything would fall into place. Love, sex, marriage, men and women acting like their natural roles, people being able to pursue things they care about rather than working some bullshit office job with some shitty corporation. I really do think this could help to fix society and get people back on track.
I think we need to talk a lot more about the correlation between gender roles and spirituality. I think you've done a lot of work on gender roles, and I think we can link that back to fixing spirituality, because I see the connection is there, but I don't quite know how it connects, if that makes sense.
So what I mean is that gender roles are ordained by God in the sense that God created man and woman, right? Man and woman, male and female, masculine and feminine, yin and yang. Like this is what God created man and woman. And we're made. Everything about a man and a woman is made to perfectly go together. And when a man is acting in his masculine energy, like masculine energy, that's a spiritual. Masculinity is a spiritual force. It's not like this isn't a material force. It's a spiritual force. The masculine spirit is different from the feminine spirit.
I don't want to get in trouble, but I think this question tracks with what you're saying. How does homosexual relationship link into gender roles and people playing their gender roles?
Even in homosexual relationships, there's usually one person who's slightly more masculine and one person who's slightly more feminine. I want to be absolutely clear as well, so the world knows this. As I've said many times, I'm completely and utterly not against homosexuality. I have nothing against gay people being in love. I think that gay relationships are a beautiful thing. I've got gay friends. My concern, as with many concerns, is the LGBT political woke transgender ideology that is destroying families. And there's a big difference between two men who meet and love each other and want to be together and, fine, want to get married. That is not the same as saying men can take hormones and be women.
No, it is not the same.
And I think that is where we draw the line. And it's also not the same as teaching young children that, I mean, you probably saw this in the video yesterday. My brother literally said to me, "Oh, Zarina, I was in the fucking barbershop and someone was saying a primary school teacher was reading a story about a teddy bear." He's like, "I was a boy, now I think I'm a girl." This is where society is being destroyed.
Okay. Was that in the UK?
It was at school here.
Well, go on, David.
Hey,
hello.
Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, bud.
Hi there.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I won't take too much time. I was just going to add a comment maybe or a question. But like the idea of, I don't know why my camera's not working. It makes no sense. But this kind of idea of like returning to traditional gender roles, like I know in America, especially with women, is like, I'm not trying to bash women at all. I just know, like, I have a lot of female family members, all that sort of stuff. So I kind of get to hear it firsthand. And it's like, that's so far beyond what they're even interested in that it's like, I don't know. I just see a lot of like, oh, return to traditional gender roles. And it's mostly men just complaining to other men, or even like women kind of talking to men to like pump them up. But there's no, like, if you ever actually.
Important to note that Zarina prays to the goddess. She's a pro strong gender roles new age type. Okay. Hey, Zach. Do I know you? Welcome. There's a link in the chat if people want to join.
The attempt to talk to other women. And the reason I say American is like, America's always kind of been culturally a little bit more gender neutral in a way. I think just because of like the rural background of things.
It hasn't been something like that since 1960s.
No, I don't think so. Women have always worked on the farm besides men. That's why you have like,
Yeah,
Amelia Earhart and stuff like that. Like that's.
Hello, Zach.
A lot of people don't understand what gender roles.
I don't want to interrupt your conversation, but I thought I'd hop on because I've watched a few of your videos, especially big conversations with Father Stephen DeYoung.
Oh,
really I love them so much.
I do too.
So thank you for having those. And
well, they've been a lot of fun. I mean, thank him. But yeah, so are you Eastern Orthodox? I mean, I see the icons behind you.
Yeah, I am. No, this is where I always used to have this, and I didn't have the icons up until my flatmate moved out recently, and he's not Orthodox, and it would have been very sort of it would have been weird, pushy, culty behavior, I guess, to
put icons up.
Things that he'd consider idolatrous, right?
What religion was he?
Public space. He's one of the slightly pick and choose bits, try and reinvent Christianity sort of things. So he's
okay. So he thinks icons are idolatry.
Yes, he's he's a Unitarian.
Okay, I
and not
approve.
he's not like a biblical Unitarian, so not like.
Oh, he's a Unitarian Universalist?
Also, no,
Okay,
but he went.
now I feel like I'm prying into his private
Yeah,
life. Yeah.
what I think he'd be comfortable with me saying is he went to a Unitarian Universalist church.
Okay.
There once, and what he came out of it realizing that he doesn't want no creed, he just wants a different creed.
I see.
So he doesn't want to disintegrate everything, but there's things that he wants to keep.
Mystery Protestant, we're everywhere. But you're Eastern Orthodox.
But I am, yes, yeah.
Which flavor?
Which flavor? Oh, vanilla. I mean, I normally go to a Greek church, sometimes to a Russian one, and sometimes to a Romanian one. So I'm not really sure. My home parish is in the Greek umbrella.
Okay.
But my priest is like, he used to be Rokor, so Russian, and then came
but the
under
liturgy
umbrella
is
of a Greek bishop. So
the liturgy is slightly different from each flavor to each flavor, right? There's at least language differences, right?
So the actual text of the liturgy is exactly the same. It's the liturgy of John Chrysostom.
Mm-hmm.
There is difference in. So there's a different music. So the tones are different.
Okay.
There's an 8-tone chanting system in
Okay.
the Greek tradition or the Byzantine tradition and the Russian tradition are these kind of two branches that dominate everything else. And they're slightly different.
Do you prefer one?
I mean, I sing in the choir out of necessity because they had no male voices.
Okay.
So it felt like I should. And so I prefer the Russian because it's easier to sing.
Okay.
But the Greek sounds nicer. So yeah.
Oh, so the Greek sounds nicer, but
the Russian's easier.
I see. Okay. I'm gonna do the Jordan Peterson thing and say you should try to learn the harder one.
I mean, yeah.
Take the responsibility. Go for the beauty. Come on, you can do it.
We do a mix of actually the Russian and the Greek one. There was an American who came to our parish. He got very confused because he went, "What are you singing?" Because we were hopping between, like, we'd do one in the Russian tones and the next one in the Greek tones, just based on what we know. And the two experiencing we've got that quiet. One is like English from a Greek background, like her parents are Cypriots, first generation immigrant, and the other one is a Romanian who came over herself.
Okay.
So during the liturgy, it will hop between like one person singing the Greek because that's what they know, and then the next thing will be in Romanian, and then the next thing will be me singing the English, and then
okay,
so,
I
all
mean,
over the place. But it's quite nice to people from all sorts of different backgrounds. Yeah.
I'm sure God understands them no matter which thing. And apparently, you have a lot of girls at your church, so you're going to have to announce your wedding on my live stream one of these days.
No plans.
No plans? Okay. Well, we'll work on that too. We'll work on that too. But so tell me about yourself. Who is Zach? How do I say this? Chave Cox?
Chave Cox. Oh, you got it right the first time. You didn't even do the obviously. At school,
Mhm.
having that surname,
Mhm.
people immediately jump to the obvious joke you can make. When there's two, I guess, but you can go.
I mean, I'm guessing with British. I mean, I know what a chav is.
No, that's not really that interesting. But you can go down the shave cocks. You can go,
Yeah, shave.
um,
Yeah.
and you can
Yeah.
chafe cocks as well. You can go.
Yeah.
That's more sophisticated.
When I was in high school, I used to get Jacob Fat and Wretched a lot.
Is it Faturecci? Is that how you pronounce it?
Faturecci, yeah. Yeah,
Faturecci.
it's Turkish. Yeah. I'm not
Oh.
Turkish, but the last name is.
See,
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about your history because I didn't get a
Oh,
huge amount of it from just watching your Stephen the Young conversation.
I mean, my life is an open book. I mean, I hate to repeat myself, but I was born in Tehran, Iran. My father's mother's family has been living on the rivers of Babylon for a good 3,000 years. They still speak Aramaic.
I like you to know that the Boney M song just into my head the moment you said it.
My the rest of my family are traditional Sephardic, meaning they ended up in Iran. Probably, I mean, my family has been in Iran for hundreds of years, but they ended up in Iran as a result of the Spanish Inquisition. And so during the Spanish Inquisition, at that time, a lot of Jews moved to the Ottoman Empire. And so my family, my father's side of the family were cloth merchants. That's actually what Faturecci means, cloth merchant. And my mother's side of the family, they were slaughterers. So they meat slaughterers. And then so Persian Jewish family, not very religious at all, because of the revolution. We ended up moving with basically the rest of the Jewish community in Tehran to the United States. So I've been living in Los Angeles since I was 7, so 1985. And as I grew up, I was much, much more religious than the rest of my family. And when I went to college, I started becoming Orthodox observant, like towards Hasidic, right? And for about 10 years, I did that. And to the point where I was almost going to be the rabbi of a synagogue, and but you can't be a rabbi until you get married. And I almost got married twice, and it fell apart. And the second time it fell apart, I kind of fell apart, and so I left religious observance behind, and just completely left religious observance behind because I became convinced, right or wrong, that that the Orthodox Jewish life was not what God wanted for me. And
So you
I
didn't
didn't.
yes, you just
No. Atheism has never been on the table, ever. Like the idea of being an atheist is just ridiculous to me. It is so incoherent and incomprehensible. I can't imagine an intelligent atheist. Although I have friends who claim to be who are very intelligent, who are atheists. I think they just have bad definitions of God, and their atheism is based on not believing in a, like, I mean, I don't know how much you know about John Vervaeke and classical theism or not.
A little bit here and there.
Yeah, so the whole Jordan Peterson thing, like, there is the God that the atheists don't believe in, I don't believe in either. Like, I don't believe in a man in the sky who's sitting there and, like, you know, who gets very angry if you masturbate, right? That was Sam Harris's whole thing. Like, if God gets mad that I masturbate, then God is bad. I can't believe in God. And it's like, okay, somebody had a guilt complex when he was 13, and like needs to get over it.
There's a famous there was a famous moment in some Catholic debating an atheist before the new atheist heyday.
Okay.
That thing was saying, okay, tell me the God that you don't believe in, and then just after the debate was saying, yeah, I don't believe in that God either.
Yeah. No, this is when you have a good definition of God. Atheism, I mean, you might believe in Spinoza's God. You might believe in a non-agentic God. Now, I do believe in an agentic God. Like, when I have my faith struggles, sometimes I wonder if it's an agentic God or a non-agentic God, right? But yeah, the idea of like atheism, like not having faith, and I mean, if you understand faith as I do, there's no such thing as a person who wakes up in the morning and doesn't have faith.
It's faith in what, right?
Right. Like, you have faith that the sun didn't explode 5 minutes ago. The sun is 8 light minutes away. The sun could have exploded 5 minutes ago. And you have no scientific way of proving to me that the sun didn't explode 5 minutes ago. There is no way you could prove to yourself that the sun did not explode 5 minutes ago. So why aren't you going around acting like the sun exploded 5 minutes ago? Because you have faith that the sun didn't explode five minutes ago.
Yeah. No, I've had conversations like this with some of my atheist friends, and it always comes down to some kind of thing where, well, I'm going to call that thing God. I think that's your God.
Yeah.
So when you get down to some kind of nebulous concept of goodness or something, and you go, okay, you believe that, like,
the top of the hierarchy is your God. The question is your God or is it an idol? That's the only question. You're either an idolater or you believe in God, right? The atheists just, it's just dumb.
I mean, that's why I like to redirect the conversation back to, what are you going to do? What do you think you should do right now? Rather than what proposition are you going to throw at me about the supernatural or something?
So this is what I have discovered through my involvement. Like, and it's funny, in the Jewish community, when we discuss it, I always assumed, and lots of people always assumed, and lots of people have this assumption that Protestants are the closest to Orthodox Judaism, and then the Catholics, and then the Eastern Orthodox. And that's just upside down. Completely upside down.
I found this when I went and I stayed with a Jewish family that I know in London, and they'd never heard of Orthodox Christianity, and I said, oh yeah, I'm an Orthodox Christian, and time after time, they'd just say things that I'd nod along with. And they go like, they're not used to Christians nodding along with this. This is weird.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, so from the Christian friends that I have, the two things that I worry about their souls are speaking in tongues. That really, really, like, it's scary stuff. Like, I have seen no biblical license for how Protestants speak in tongues, glossolalia, it's called, right?
I have a
Like-
couple of stories about that I'd love to pick your brains on. What's the second one?
The second one is penal substitutionary atonement.
Right. Yeah.
If your plan on the day of judgment is to say to God, an innocent man suffered for my sins, I think God's answer is going to be, if it's right for an innocent man to suffer for your sins, how much more so is it right for you to suffer for your own sins?
Yeah.
And that's what kind of scares me on behalf of my Protestant friends.
No, that's why what I actually really agreed with when I read Richard Dawkins' sort of fuming open letter to INRC Ali that got posted in the Discord. I read that, and the one thing in it that I could totally get behind was him saying, "You don't really believe this, do you? This horrible, nasty theory, do you, Aya?"
I didn't see the entire letter, but on Twitter I responded to his posting of it with, "How do you feel when Christians tell you that you're not really an atheist?"
It was the way he opened it by saying, "Oh, I have so much respect for you. I think you're great, Ayan," and then spent the rest of the letter just calling her stupid and saying, "How could you succumb to such weakness?" It was the best quote of it.
I have had so many people, so many friends say, "No, Jacob, you're too smart to actually believe in the stuff you believe in." Trey kind of does this. He thinks a lot of the stuff that I say, I'm like, I don't actually mean it, and oftentimes I absolutely do.
Does he think you're doing it?
No, but well, I think that he does it because he operates as if he doesn't believe it sometimes. That's what I mean.
Ah, okay. I mean, that's
For example,
it's a
like
fair accusation. Not necessarily for you, but for people in general. You meet this a fair amount. People saying, "Oh yes, I believe."
Well, are you talking about the fact that, like, Trey, are you talking about the fact I don't keep kosher, for example?
no, like for example, how old is the age of the Earth?
5,783 years and 4 months.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I don't have the actual dates. I could look up the actual date, how many days it is.
So what do you think about Jacob's actions inconsistent with that?
Well, like when he's in a normal conversation, he'll say like 12 billion years ago, 13 billion years ago. He'll say 1 million years ago, 5 million years ago. You know.
I have explained Omphalos to you.
Is that a rare type of animal?
No, Omphalos is actually how you say in Latin belly button.
Right?
And so, did Adam have a belly button?
I would assume not.
So this is a theological problem, right?
Hmm.
If Adam did not have a belly button, then God created him not actually looking like us. But if he did have a belly button, then God created him as if something which never happened, which is him having an umbilical cord, actually happened, right? So theologically, this is a serious problem.
Is this going to go in the realm of like God planted dinosaur fossil records?
So
Yeah,
this is sometimes
Something
called
about that.
last. This is sometimes called last Thursdayism, right? So how do you know that God didn't create the world last Thursday with your memories of 10 years ago, and all of your memories from, like, how do you know when the world actually started?
Well, I don't think that God is gaslighting me.
No, nobody said God is gaslighting you. But God is putting you in a contrived situation of being tested. And that, I mean, the Bible says that quite clearly. And the fact is that the Talmud teaches that the world was created b'tzivionam. We actually get it out of verses in the Bible. The Talmud from thousands of years ago says this, that God created Adam on day one looking like an old man, right? So I believe that the world was created 5,783 years and 4 months ago.
Did
But-
you try and trick Adam into believing that he was?
Well, in a sense, there is.
Wesley had?
So the word world, olam, in Hebrew, also means to hide. It's the same word. Helem means to hide. Olam means world.
So why can't we just say that time is metaphoric at that point? Because couldn't I say, okay, so I'm going to be real nerdy with this, right? But let's say instead of God placing Adam as an old man, right? Couldn't I also say that Adam put him into basically a rotation, a fast enough rotation, or a slow enough rotation?
Oh,
Around
that's
a high
actually
mass
something.
object?
Okay, so I have to say,
Okay.
Orthodox Jews, especially modern Orthodox Jews who are very into science, also say when it talks about the 7 days of creation, you have to take into account the speed of God was going at, because there's a relativity, right? So since God is outside of time, you have to also take that into consideration. I have to take this call. I'm sorry. I will be right back.
No worries. So Trey, what's your story? Tell me everything. You are muted.
One second.
I'll just invent your story in my head in the meantime. Raised by armadillos in the woods somehow. The armadillos got there from a zoo escape. And the armadillos taught you to always curl up in a defensive ball at anything that was threatening. And then you tried this one day when a lion that had also escaped from the zoo was prowling around the forest. And so you tried rolling up in a ball, and the lion, of course, just scratched you back. You don't have the armadillo's thick skin. And it taught you to fight for your right to party. And so you went out of the forest and decided to become a vigilante. Is this tracking? Is this
Yep,
pretty much right?
100% accurate. I don't even have anything else to say.
don't-
I'm liking this guy.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Armadillos? What?
Yeah, you just missed this conversation. You need to pay more attention, Jacob. That's all I'm saying.
It was the construction guys. I am hoping to actually have my bathroom finished one day, with hopefully before the end of the year. Yeah. So you guys if you want to continue in your conversations, continue in your conversations. This is a just chatting stream. We can talk about anything you guys want.
Oh, I do want to go back to the tongues thing. I also want to know your story, Trey. But I'll go back to the tongues thing because I thought it was really interesting that you singled that out. I've got a friend at the moment that I'm trying to talk to about this because I'm not really sure exactly what to say to him about it, and I don't want to go into too much detail on this public stream.
Oh, I understand.
But suffice it to say that I know someone who has come to faith in God
Mhm.
through
Speaking in tongues.
Like, having this thing and doing like the speaking in tongues thing, like how the Pentecostals understand glossolalia,
Yeah.
babbling in a language they don't understand, and then receiving an interpretation from on high for it.
Well, okay.
I definitely cautioned about this because he came to talk to me about it,
Mhm.
and we kind of got to a point where he sort of acknowledged that it was wrong for him to do it in front of someone, that this was something that had been given to him privately,
Okay.
and that because he was convinced by St. Paul's words in 1 Corinthians about speaking in tongues,
Mhm.
and interpreting this as doing this modern Pentecostal babbling thing,
Mhm.
which I don't think is what St. Paul's talking about, but let's say it is for a second. He was still, St. Paul's pretty clear, like, okay, this is down the list of spiritual gifts. This is right at the bottom.
Mhm.
And it's something that is there to build up someone in themselves.
Right. So I'll tell you my favorite story. There's a man who hears about a fruit that is out of this world. It's the best fruit possible, and he becomes obsessed with this idea of finding this fruit, and he goes out searching for the fruit, and he goes to wise men, and he goes to hermits, and he goes from city to city, and he crosses rivers and oceans and mountain ranges and deserts. He spends his entire life looking for this fruit. And towards the end of his life, he encounters the tree, and he grabs the fruit and he bites into it. And it is the most wondrous thing he has ever tasted. And he feels that spending his entire life searching for this fruit was worth it. And as he's reveling in that, this little child walks up to the tree, grabs a fruit, starts eating it. And the guy looks at the child, says, "But I searched my entire life to find this tree. How did you arrive here so young?" And the child says, "I was born here." Now, to understand this story, you have to, and the allegory it is to the knowledge of God, right? And it is, obviously, an allegory to the knowledge of God. First question is, does that fruit have the taste that to that young man as it does to the man who has been searching for it and has worked so hard for it?
No, I don't think it does.
There is a worth to it that the child cannot appreciate. Second, okay, this man spent his life looking and found this fruit. What's that child going to do? How is that child going to find the meaning in his life? Right? When he's sitting at the foot of that tree. And I'll add a third question, which is relevant to what we're talking about, which is, when we talk about God, do we ever arrive at the foot of that tree? God isn't a tree that's planted somewhere. God is infinitely away from us, and we are all on a journey. Every single religion I know of refers to itself as a way, right? Christianity famously was originally the way. In Hebrew, we talk about halacha, right? It's translated Jewish law, but it actually means to walk, right? Zen, everybody talks about. Everybody talks about like traveling as the journey of faith, right?
Yeah.
So
Further up and further in.
What?
Further up and further in.
Further up.
CSO.
Okay. So for me, what's become very important is to realize that imagine here I am in Los Angeles, and God is actually in New York, and that's the path I have to go. There are guiding lights along the way towards God, which are not the final destination. And frankly, I think that's I interpret Paul saying, "Now we see as through a glass darkly," right?
I've heard you talking about that with
Yeah,
Stephen.
that's how I view Islam and Christianity, right? And I see a similar thing with this speaking in tongues, which brings some people to faith, right? I think I think these are people who stopped at Salt Lake City and just need to keep on walking, right?
I mean, what I emphasize in my conversations with them is okay, cool. You've had a thing happen to you. What are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
And I think it's really helpful that he's had that from multiple people when he's gone for advice about this.
Yeah.
Is he's got the okay, what are you going to do about it? Because that's what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're at the tree. Where are you going to keep on walking to? Right? What are you going to do with that fruit?
The tree. I do think none of us are at the tree.
What?
I do think none of us are at the tree right now. We're not.
So the word tree in Hebrew is always a metaphor for the Torah. So we say it is a tree of life to those who hold on to it. So I believe when we say, "Oh, he came and left," okay. So he's now. Why am I Tayo? Tayo lives in London. So I'm guessing he saw that you speak British and was like, yeah. Well, I need to come in and say hi. That and Rabbi Mullet is watching.
Drinking on the street.
But I believe that when, for example, the Christian Bible says salvation is from the Jews. You worship not what you do not. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know. When we talk about the extra love that God has for the Jews, and we do talk about that, and being a chosen people, it is truly that we, by this wonderful, miraculous event of Sinai, were given, and you could read Paul in Romans saying precisely that, right? That the Jews, in being given the Torah, have a gift in every way.
Yeah.
And so
But it's still what you do with it that matters. Which is the
oh,
next
of
thing.
course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And ultimately God is infinite, and our journey of sanctification, right? I don't say because I have been given the gift of Torah that means that I have been perfected or am in any way perfect or in any way live up to it. But I think what has become immensely clear over the past 2,000 years, and more specifically over the past 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, is, but frankly, I think the Dead Sea Scrolls and the internet has helped show a lot of people, and that's what I see in the Noahide movement, is there are 100,000 Gentiles who they don't want to be Jews. They don't want to keep Torah and everything like that, but they just realize that Judaism is the truth. And
So I have
yeah.
another question about my friend, not the tongue speaking friend, my old flatmate.
Okay.
Because he sort of sees himself as a Noahide.
Okay.
He also doesn't accept all of the Torah.
So a
And-
Noahide isn't really expected necessarily to accept all of the Torah. So
Right, okay.
we have pretty lax standards for Noahides. Honestly, like it's pretty. I mean, if you're going to go to the extreme, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. So if you go to Sefaria and you look at the translation of the Babylonian Talmud, it's called the Steinsaltz edition because Rabbi Steinsaltz translated it to English. Okay, he's like, that is a monumental work, and yes, I'm explaining that, Rabbi. There is a matter of scholarly debate and a question for the postscript, but Rabbi Steinsaltz wrote a article where he discussed the possibility of Hindus qualifying as Noahides. And if somebody of his caliber had not, and he is obviously, yes, Rabbi, I already dropped the link to a bunch of people. We're definitely all very excited about you talking about this. But I have to say, Rabbi Mullet, as much as I love him, is not a posek himself. Obviously, I'm not even a rabbi. Certainly not a posek. But Rabbi, no, Steinsaltz is he is an accepted posek. I'm sorry. Like, this is, now we're getting into intramural Jewish discussions, but Steinsaltz, because he was Chabad and because he was involved in certain projects which were not generally, I mean, even in Chabad, he was, but he is accepted. His view is a valid view. I mean, you cannot dismiss Rabbi Steinsaltz's view. And yes, it is. I mean, you could say it's a dat yachid. It is the opinion of someone who has his own. It's his individual opinion, and we go after the majority. It's certainly not a majority opinion. And I have to say, he brings up the question. He doesn't actually say Hindus qualify as Noahides. So that's important, right? He is discussing the possibility. But once you're talking about Hindus possibly being Noahide, like all the Christians and Muslims, like, right?
So here's the question. Because this is something which has bothered my friend in somewhat of a similar way to Sam. But Sam has this extra advantage in a way of, as far as I understand it from listening to a bit of him, he kind of affirms the whole of the Bible. So he's got the kind of Protestant sola scriptura thing laid out. And a lot of times Protestants care more about that than about any other doctrinal boundary. With my friend, he doesn't have that. He doesn't have any community that really can accept him other than the Unitarian Universalists. And that's just because they have literally no boundaries at all. And it really troubles him because he wants to have a spiritual home.
He can become a Noahide.
In terms of where he goes.
Right. Yeah.
Congregates, where he gathers.
Right. And I mean, this is one of the things. The fact is that the Jewish community has not sufficiently prepared for receiving the Noahide world. When I speak to rabbis, with very few exceptions, Rabbi Mullet being an obvious and welcome exception, they are not even thinking about this stuff. This book, I was very glad to get, and the fact that it was written and the fact that it is being discussed, we are in a situation in the Orthodox Jewish community which we honestly nobody even imagined. So let me just address some things Rabbi Mullet said. Chutz lamachane, outside the camp. I am very reluctant to refer to Rabbi Steinsaltz as chutz lamachane, but everybody has their own camps. I mean, I'm sure there are certain people I think are outside the camp that you may not also. That's probably the second edition, which is a single volume. Yes, it is. Yeah. This is the second edition. The Jewish community has been surprised by this thing that's happening, and we are in the process of dealing with it, and there's a lot of growing pains. So, for example, it is pretty much accepted by everybody I know that the best thing for a Noahide to do is to go to a rabbinic court and to accept upon himself being a Noahide. And I went and I looked up the process because a friend of mine wanted to do it, right? And in fact, he did do it. But it was an ad hoc rabbinic court. It wasn't an actual rabbinic court. And we didn't have a text. I had to contrive a text for him to say, like a script for them. Because, like, despite the fact when it's actually something that you have to actually do, and frankly, Rabbi Mollet, if you have opinions on what a nusach for that should be, what I actually had him do was recite the 13 animamins, and then the 7 laws of Noah, and basically say the nusach that Maimonides has of what that person should say in front bifnei shlosha. I thought that would be the right thing to do. That's basically what he did. But the question becomes, like, how do you actually do it, right? And we haven't had anybody do this for thousands of years. And if they had done this, even 300 to 500 years ago, they would have been murdered by it. I mean, Justinian's code made being a Noahide illegal. You had him recite the 13 animamins, but you think a Hindu can be a Noahide, or that he doesn't have to believe in the whole Torah?
They could never said a Hindu can be a Noahide.
Right. See, Rabbi, even Zach is coming to my defense. I'm saying there are lots of various opinions.
I have a question. Why don't
I
all
would very
the
much
Noahides-
like, I would very much like everybody to believe the 13 animamins. But go ahead, Trey. Yes.
Why don't all the Noahide just go to Reformed and just take it over?
Because Reform don't believe in the 13 animamins.
Yeah, but you said it wasn't a requirement. Like, you said it wasn't a requirement, right? They don't have to follow the laws of the Torah. They get all the vibes of Judaism, right? And right?
No. They still have to believe that there is a God who created the world and gave the Torah. Like, Reform doesn't believe any of that stuff.
Right, but okay, give the Torah.
But they don't
isn't
say that you don't have to. Like, they don't say you have to believe what they believe, right?
Right. They don't have any beliefs whatsoever. Like,
Exactly. You have all your Judaism. You don't have to worry about the Orthodox kicking you out, right? You can already take you in, right? They're not going to care, right, if you're doing a bunch of wild
Trey,
stuff. Like, it's
people-
the perfect thing.
But no, it's not the perfect thing, because you want to do what God wants you to do.
What?
You
Okay.
don't just want somebody to tell you you could do whatever you want. You want to know what God wants you to do so you can do it.
No, but okay. Noahides, okay, what's the difference in what a Noahide would do and someone who's reformed?
Well, for one thing, Reform does gay marriages.
But it didn't you tell me that under certain conditions that would even be allowed for a Noahide to do?
To have a gay marriage? No. What I said was, and Rabbi Mullet will be shocked when I say this, but I had I don't even know if I can say this publicly. I had an actual posek. There was an actual question to ask a psak din, and Rabbi Mullet knows which posek, because I told him that I asked this posek a question about two gay men, and so he said that mesolel for a Noahide, even by men, is mutar. That's what he said. Meaning that some forms of intimacy between gay men is not prohibited to a Noahide, which is shocking thing to say, but this was a rabbi with the. So a posek is defined as a rabbi who knows isur ve'heter. He knows how to bind and loosen on earth as in heaven. And this was a yeah. That's what you're asking about, Trey.
Is it directly equivalent?
Yes, Rabbi. That's basically what he said. And I'm not going to say that
But he
out
was
loud.
saying it with fancy Hebrew words. So
Yes.
I'm interested in authority structures actually, because I don't know anything about Orthodox Judaism. Is a posek equivalent directly to a bishop, as far as you know?
In a sense, so as I understand the word bishop, it seems to have come out of a similar idea as what in Qumran was called mevaker, which can be translated as overseer, which means bishop. And literally it means visitor. And in modern Jewish terms, we have this term called mashgiach, which means a supervisor. Okay, so Rabbi Mullet says, as disturbing as that is, there's a strong case to be made that that's true for non-Jews, though the opposite case can also be made. Yes. So exactly. So you know the rabbi I'm talking about, who I asked.
So
and yes, that was his psak din.
So
hold
hold
on.
up.
Let's what?
Pause.
Yeah.
Pause. That would mean that if you're saying what Noahides could do, and you want Jewish community, that's like pretty close. Like as you said, what did you tell me? If there's a perfect church, don't join it because you'll mess it up. You know, Reformed isn't perfect, but it's probably closer to community, and it already has everything set up that the Noahides need.
Okay, I'm going to say something that might upset Rabbi Mullet, but I have been advising. Yeah, it is who you think it is. You remember the email I sent when I said he had shockingly lenient things? Yeah, that's who it was. And just to be clear, it was not Rabbi Breitowitz, so that people know. But it was a rabbi that Rabbi Mullet knows. Because I know people are going to assume it was Rabbi Breitowitz. I did not ask that question of Rabbi Breitowitz. Frankly, I did not have the chutzpah to write an email about such things to Rabbi Breitowitz. So to get Rabbi Mullet mad at me, I have been telling some people who are Noahides that they should go to an Eastern Orthodox church, because in their situation, to the best of my knowledge, that is I'm sure Rabbi Breitowitz has been very, very busy. You actually asked this? I mean, I would be interested to know what Rabbi Breitowitz thinks. But in my estimation, I am not saying that it is perfect for a Noahide to that everything about Eastern Orthodoxy is perfect, but out of the various choices that people have, and considering their real life situations, b'diavad, so there are several people who I have recommended they go to Eastern Orthodox Church. And the fact is, when you look at the difference between a Reformed synagogue and an Eastern Orthodox church, I think there is no question that an Eastern Orthodox church is a preferable place for a Noahide to find community than a Reform synagogue. I don't know what Rabbi.
That doesn't make any sense, Jacob.
Why?
Didn't you talk about how there's a lot of emphasis about putting a fence around sin? So like, if something is a sin, you should like be way farther away from it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So aren't you more closely doing idolatry in Orthodox church rather
I don't-
than pretty much in
Then
Reform?
Reform? No, I don't think so. And Rabbi Mullet, thank God, said you might not be wrong, Jacob, which would be nice if I was not wrong.
I
Yeah.
think you just. I'm very confused on this because it seems like you'll be committing more sins in Orthodox church than a Reform thing. Because you'll be talking about the Trinity, you'll a bunch of vows, you'll be eating what they say is God and the flesh.
Oh,
of God.
hold on. What I did not say is that you should take communion. I never said that. I never said you should venerate the icons or anything like that. I said an Eastern Orthodox Christian community is a healthier community to raise your children in and to go to and be a part of. Now, whether or not you can participate in that stuff, I didn't go into. As my 10th grade Rebbe would say, you're only 98% wrong. Glad to hear it.
Wait. So then that's your personal opinion, not what you think the rabbis are saying. Like that's your political. Not what
No. Okay, hold on. So there are rabbis who can give a psak din, who can give a actual an actual decision according to what the halacha is. Those rabbis are poskim. I am not a posek. I cannot make such decisions. There are things which are clearly taught in halacha by the poskim, and if you've studied those things enough that when someone asks you a question, you can apply the rules to the situation, right? Then you can. That's not considered giving up psak din. That is just generally being a reference material for somebody who's trying to look up a halacha. Now, the fact is, I've found myself in the horrible situation I don't want to be in of learning details about people's lives in ways that I can't then go ask a posek without the way I frame the question. And I have spoken to rabbis, including the rabbi that I was talking to Rabbi Mullet about the fact that I am in a situation where by the time I frame the question, there's no question anymore, right? So, when there is still a question, and in order to make sure that I am right, I am actually asking the poskim that I have access to about these things. But the fact is, by the time I frame the question, usually there's no question, and it becomes a question of how am I framing the question, and I end up framing the question. Do you understand what I mean?
I think so.
Okay, so let me put it this way. Okay, so if somebody is if a Noahide has to put their kids into school, right? Their kids have to go to school, right? Now, obviously, it would be better if their kids were going to a Jewish school or being homeschooled than going to an Eastern Orthodox or Christian school or a Protestant school or a Catholic school or a public school, right? But the question becomes, what is the situation in that person's life, right? And what are the considerations? What are the available options for that person of which school they send their kid to? And what don't you understand?
What you're saying is that it is. Why don't you believe God will guide them in the Reformed synagogue? Because basically what hears to me is like, okay, yes, they could be around a bunch of sin, and maybe they may commit a little sin, but it has a better outcome. That's why it's good.
No. That's not what I'm saying at all. So halacha is an expression of God's desire in the world to pasken a halacha, to actually come to a halachic decision of, in this situation, is it better to do X or Y, is to explain God's desire in the world. So when a rabbi paskens a halacha, he is revealing God's will in the world. He is guiding that person. That's what a posek does. He reveals God's will in the world. And that is his obligation as a posek.
Can he override God's rule?
So that's the famous story of the ovens of Achnai. It is God's will that the rabbis have the capacity to say what the halacha is. That's what we mean when we say to bind and loosen on earth as in heaven. That is the responsibility and the authority which God has given to the rabbis. In giving the Torah to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai, that is the authority. So Rabbi Mullet says Deuteronomy 17. We can pull it up, but this is the authority that God has given to the elders of Israel. You were in the class I gave on that subject, I believe, Jacob. Yes, I remember you. Yes, this is a clear teaching of Orthodox Judaism. So Fraud asks, can you go into more detail about why that would be permissible for Noachides? So Rabbi Mullet had put a link to that class on the thing. As far as what is permissible in terms of sexual relations with for Noachides, I don't want to get into details, but suffice it to say that it's possible to say that the biblical prohibition of homosexual relations only applies to a particular sex act, I'm guessing to sodomy, and that Jews are prohibited from any sort of. So we have certain rules, including Kadoshim Tihiu, you shall be holy. So there are various reasons why a Jew cannot participate in any other sex act outside of matrimony, but it's not clear that any of those necessarily apply to a Noachide. And so while having a committed relationship where you agree to not to only to never have children. So as I understand it, it is prohibited for a Noachide to be in a monogamous relationship with someone who could not possibly have children, because they do have a responsibility to have a child, but after they have at least one child, I don't know what the particular prohibition would be for after that a Noachide basically doing anything short of actual sodomy. Yeah. And while it was surprising to hear that the rabbi I asked did not see any prohibition, any other prohibition, because there are several prohibitions you could possibly think of, which may apply. Ultimately, he obviously thought they didn't apply. And the fact is, we were talking in a particular situation where there was reason to be lenient. And when there's reason to be lenient, there's reason to be lenient. You're making all these faces.
Yeah, I was just waiting for you to be done. There was just so much you said. I guess, okay. Because you said it's better for the kids, right? And it seems like you're making a utilitarian argument. Because you haven't told me a sin that they're doing in the Reformed synagogue.
They
But I
don't
can probably say,
believe
like,
in
yeah,
God. No. They teach that the Torah is not true. They teach all kinds of horrible heresies. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but they don't have to affirm that.
Yeah, they do.
Like, what's
Every
worse?
time. No,
What's
they
worse?
very.
Like,
Hold on. No. Yeah. Did you not notice that they changed Mechayeh HaMetim, who revives the dead, so to at least Eastern Orthodox Christians believe in resurrection of the dead. That's one of the 13 principles of Jewish faith. Reformed Judaism is not Judaism.
yeah, but isn't idolatry a worse sin? Like, isn't there a tier list?
If it's idolatry, obviously, if you say that that Eastern Orthodox are actually committing idolatry, it's not even clear that that's worse than saying there's no God. Maimonides, if you read the first chapter of the laws of idolatry, which I highly recommend, he makes it seems very clear to me from what he says that somebody who actually says there is no God is in a much worse situation than someone who believes that they should bow to lesser gods than God.
Why? I'm very confused.
Okay, he explains at length at Read the chapter. I can pull it up later, but
I guess I will, but like that means like if I have a bad thought in my head, that means I'm committing a sin. But that doesn't really seem. I thought that didn't really track. Like,
hold on. There. It's not just about the bad thought, but obviously there are things, there are beliefs that are foundational and fundamental beliefs in Judaism, including the belief that there is a God. Like that is the foundation of everything.
so
You can't. Yeah, that belief is fundamental to everything you do as a Jew.
okay, so didn't you tell me the story about the Jews in the Holocaust and they convict God and everything like that?
Yeah.
So are they done? Like, are they just going to the bad place, or?
No, what are you talking about? Do you not remember the rest of that story? What's the end
No,
of the
I
story?
want you to tell it the rest of the story because this is an important point.
The rest of the story is after they convict God, they go and they say their afternoon prayers.
Exactly. What the
Okay.
Noahides doing the same thing. They don't believe in God, but they're doing the exact same thing.
What
They
are you
think God is a
talking
bad guy,
about?
and then they do it. And then they do it. And that's
No,
what-
you're talking about reform, not Noahides, first of all. Noahides believe in God. You're talking about reform. And reform specifically teaches that we do these things for utilitarian purposes, not because we believe in God.
Okay.
They believe it's a cute thing to do, and that you could just as well go to a concert. So why not have their synagogue be a concert?
Okay. So then what? Then why
What
tell the
don't you
story?
understand about the fact that it's worse to be an atheist than an idolater?
No, but then why tell the story about the Holocaust? Then that would be a bad story. They should stop.
No,
doing it.
it's
If they think
not.
God's bad, they should stop.
No, you don't understand what we're saying at all, and the rabbi's here to clarify.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Hello, Rabbi.
Don't pin this on me, Jacob. Don't pin this on
Pin
me.
what on
I'm
you?
here to say hello.
Hello, Rabbi.
I'm here to give you a big hug. I'm
you.
here to give Trey a big hug. I give hugs. Oh, I have the audio coming.
And you said something very important, Rabbi, which was, yes, obviously, any sort of homosexual relations are not a good thing. The question is, in certain situations, might it be better than other things that may be going on in that person's life?
Was it better than other things that are? That's not what I was saying. That's
That-
not what I was saying. In other words, I would say that within the Noahide framework, there are a few things that are strictly forbidden, and then there are a lot of things that are kind of recommended behavior,
Okay.
but don't necessarily have let's say legal ramification or can be pursued in a court of law for any kind of corporal punishment or anything.
Let me explain the situation, and the reason I went and spoke to the rabbi, and you know who I'm talking about, was
it's the one you CC'd me on the email.
Yes. And so I went and I asked him because, given the particulars of the situation between the two men, and I won't go into the particulars, I thought that the halacha would be that this is a situation in which it would be better to be lenient in certain manners so that worse outcomes would not happen. And I asked, is this Bedi Eved something that could be permitted? And his response was that he didn't see that it was even Bedi Eved. Lechatchila, he thought it was mutar. And that was the shock.
Yeah, well, I would say he's much more knowledgeable than me. I have done some reading on the subject. Obviously, I have the book you were showing, and I have Rabbi Shirky's book.
Which there's a book club Chazi started recently.
I noticed on your channel. Yeah. So, I know something about the subject. I would say he knows more about the subject, but yet even saying that lecha techila, that is, so to speak, not optimally like recommended, but that strictly speaking, there's no legal prohibition at all. Perhaps there are a lot of things in the books that come under recommended behaviors. So another and behaviors that are not recommended. Let's say, for example, sexual intercourse, heterosexual intercourse, not within the confines of marriage. Okay, premarital, extramarital sex may not be strictly forbidden. It may be under the category of what you and I would call zinut. Now the question is zinut forbidden for Noahides? Technically speaking, it's not forbidden by the Noahide laws. Only certain sexual sins like the homosexual act, adultery, incest, and the like. Zunut, which essentially would be translated as promiscuity. Promiscuity is not strictly forbidden. However, we do find in scripture that it is highly, I don't know what the opposite is for recommended. Highly not recommended, for discouraged, highly discouraged for Bnei Noach. For example, in the story of Yehuda and Tamar, where, by the way, Yehuda does engage in zinut, but he understood what he did was wrong. The text certainly frames it as a wrong act, although he's not punishable for it, and yet he feels that she's punishable for it, right? And that's a complicated story, and it's a deep study and everything. But you see from the story that this was a non-encouraged activity. It was a discouraged activity with maybe even legal ramifications. That means that the court of Yehuda had enacted what we might call today rabbinic decrees or fences, had enacted certain civil penalties for engaging in this behavior, even though it's technically not forbidden from the Torah. So, in other words, you even see the idea of fences and decrees already in the Torah in this example. You have other examples like spilling seed, and that's maybe something you were referring to earlier, where we find that what's his name? Er and Onan, the sons of Judah, died because of spilling seed. And the question is, where do we find such a prohibition? And there the punishment was from heaven, right? So it certainly seems like it's a wrong thing to do. And then you mentioned about the obligation to have children. The question is, does a Noahide have such an obligation? And you'll say, well, Adam and Eve were commanded, and certainly if not them, then Noah, because the verse of be fruitful and multiply appears twice, once to Adam and once to Noah. There's a question, was it a blessing or was it a command? We understand at least one of them was a command, and one of them may have been a blessing, to be fruitful and multiply. It may have been both. But does that apply to Noahides nowadays? Now you might wonder, why not? If it was given to Noah directly or to Adam, it should apply for all mankind. Now there is, what's his name in the book, Sheva Mitzvot, Rabbi Weiner. He talks about how and this is based on Maimonides, right? And it's very hard to talk out of two sides of the mouth. Maimonides, when it comes to Noahides, and then talk out of the other side of the mouth and go, oh, they don't need to believe in the Torah. It's okay for a Hindu. A Hindu could be a Noahide. This is talking out of two sides of the mouth, because Maimonides is from whom we know most about the laws of Noah, because he's the first one to codify it. He's pretty strict about what the requirements of being a Ben Noach are, and among them is that they do need to believe in the Torah, and they essentially do need to believe the same things a Jew believes. And he says that they need to perform the commandments with the intent that they're doing so to fulfill their obligations as was commanded to Noah and revealed in the Torah. That means that it's not enough, according to Maimonides, and you're right, this is a matter of scholarly debate, but this is the position Maimonides takes. And it's a fascinating topic we could explore for a long time. And I could flesh out the other side of it. Because Maimonides doesn't say anything without a source. Everything in Maimonides is based on an earlier source, or at least his understanding of it, right? So what source is he basing it on? Some of the commentators on Maimonides say we don't know where he got it from. It's just his own logical
And
axiom.
okay, I have to say, Derech Eretz Kadma LaTorah is a halachic principle that could be a source for what he's saying.
Okay, but if you look carefully, you'll find that there is a midrash that does say this. However, there are two variant girsaot. How would you translate that? Variant texts,
Variant text, yeah, textual
versions, variant versions of that midrash. One which says that they need to perform it as commanded in the Torah that was given to Moses, and one that says they need to perform it as it was commanded to Noah, by the creator of the world. So that it seems Maimonides had the one that specifies Moses, because his understanding is that it's not enough for someone to just be like, I want to do these things because I think they're moral, or even because I think that's what God wants. But he has to acknowledge that our knowledge of this comes from the Torah, and the Torah having revealed that Noah and Adam were commanded in these things. So therefore, I find myself commanded. But therefore, the definition of the Noahide laws comes through a Sinaitic covenant. There's a lot of basis for this. So to the degree that whatever the laws were up until Sinai is irrelevant after Sinai. There's a lot of material on this. And the only thing that's relevant post Sinai is whatever the law became following the Sinai event.
That's how he explains the Rebbe's sichas.
I'm saying a lot of what I'm saying based on what I read there, but there's quite a bit of material to support this, and so therefore some of the things that may have been part of the Noahide laws prior to Sinai change after Sinai, including perhaps the command to be fruitful and multiply may shift at that point to be specifically for Israel. And that's not to say that a Noahide shouldn't have children, but he's not obligated to. But again, this is all where it goes into this gray area of recommended behavior, where it's clear that it is the will of Hashem that the earth be populated with people. We understand be fruitful and multiply as a command, but even if the command doesn't apply to Noahides, they should know that while they're not obligated, and therefore maybe it won't be required of them, but it is a fulfillment of God's will to have children, because he reveals that it's his desire that it should be. So there's a difference in what God wants versus what he requires of us. So the same thing when it comes to, let's say, homosexual behavior. It's clear that this is not something God wants. The question is, what legal requirements are there? And even the Torah itself only references a prohibition regarding the act of penetration. But the fact that two men may not engage in other acts is because first of all, there's rabbinic issues here, but the rabbinic commands are not for the Noahide. That's clear. So the rabbinic prohibitions are all based on this idea that it's clear that God does not want a person to engage in activity X. And I know that activity Y will lead to activity X. So certainly I should not engage in activity Y. Even if the Torah doesn't explicitly command it, it's obvious that would be a negative behavior. And so the rabbis legislated some of those behaviors as forbidden under the law. But even when they aren't forbidden rabbinically, a person it doesn't then leap to, so it's totally fine to do. There may not be legal ramification, but you're not pleasing God when you do this. So it leads to bad behavior. In other words, if I tell two men you could do everything except, so what, you think that they're just going to be so firm about it? Let's be honest. Once you are heated, it's very difficult to control one's passions. So, that's the whole premise of the fences, is we don't want to allow ourselves to get into an area of temptation that becomes too strong for us to resist, and then we break God's law. So, therefore, within Jewish law, it's forbidden for a man even to touch an area of his body that will lead to arousal. It's the Torah forbids a man from looking at imagery that's evocative. That law is not necessarily, strictly speaking, commanding the Noahide, but he could take a clue and a cue that if I'm not supposed to engage in forbidden sexual behavior, I shouldn't arouse myself to it. Right? So the issue of arousal becomes a logical step from, if I know what God wants me to do and not to do, and I know what things will lead to do the right things or the wrong things, I also know what other steps that are not included in the law are either recommended or discouraged through, like you said, derech eretz kadma laTorah. Derech eretz literally means the law of the land, but in a certain way we say
natural law is
natural
the
law.
concept.
That's a good. That natural law is a good translation. I never thought of that. But also we have you hear this concept even in the Orthodox world, in the halachic world, the Jewish legal world, the yeshiva world. They talk about the 5th volume of Shulchan Aruch. For those who don't know, Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, has 4 volumes, and each volume regards a different area of the one's normal life.
Yeah.
And so there's a talk of, there's this people talk about this idea. What do you call it? A colloquialism or a vernacular of the 5th volume of Shulchan Aruch. The 5th volume, what I mean, there's only 4 volumes. What's the 5th volume? So the 5th volume is, Jacob?
Derech eretz?
Derech eretz, they call it common sense. The 5th volume is common sense. What's commonsensical is obviously required. You think, I don't need to command you on something that's just dumb. Like, God didn't need to speak everything out. There are certain things that are so intuitive that obviously you shouldn't do. And while maybe not punishable in court, in a certain way, it is punishable by God, because it's almost like the first commandment is don't be an idiot.
So I'm sure you've gotten the whole
I scared
thing
everybody
about.
off the stream, Jacob.
Oh no! Trey comes on when there's nobody else, just so I have somebody to talk to.
Oh, sweetie pie.
Yeah,
Trey. Wow, what a beautiful person you are.
he is a beautiful person. So when so I'm sure you've gotten the whole thing. Certain people look up the fact that in the Talmud there are discussions about some things can be patur, right? And they say, oh, the Talmud says this sort of thing is allowed, and it's a common anti-Semitic
This is the problem.
trope.
I don't mean to
Yes.
insult your viewers. This is the problem of when Gentiles pick up a volume of the Talmud. They have no idea how to understand this volume.
Yes.
There's so much prerequisite foundational
Yeah.
suppositions before you even begin to interpret this text, that if you come in without that, I mean, it's like sticking your head into an airspace where there's thousands of arrows flying back and forth and just going, and then you get shot with arrows and you're surprised. You can't study Talmud unless you've gone through 15 years of prerequisites, or its equivalent, right? Or you're studying from someone who has those prerequisites and he can instruct you. But I know what you're referencing is the concept within the Talmud of patur. Whenever it says patur, which means exempt, it means patur. What are the next 2 words?
Aval asur.
Valasur. Patur, exempt means forbidden. Exempt doesn't mean permitted. It means it's true that the law doesn't require a consequence in the court, or even, so to speak, on earth. Let's say there are things for which a person has to bring a sacrifice. So the court doesn't enforce that. That's between man and God. So even though it says in the law, chayav, he is liable. Liable means what? Liable, he's required to bring a sacrifice. So it doesn't mean that the court punishes him. And I've heard rabbis make this mistake. When I say rabbis, I'm thinking of someone who you and I would object to this title. And even though they purport to be Orthodox, we're not already talking about Reform or conservative, but a rabbi, I'll just do an impersonation and you'll know who I'm talking about. A rabbi who teaches like this. Did you know that if you go and by mistake you turn off the light in the bathroom on Shabbat, it's death penalty? Moron who knows like you. I forgot what's your phrase. He knows less than nothing. I forget. You have a whole thing that you say like when you talk about one of the other guys. But
knows less than nothing. Yeah,
I forgot. You have like a whole thing that you say. But he like it's baby stuff. The most elementary student knows that when you desecrate the Sabbath by mistake because you forgot, so you turn off the light or on the light without thinking, and you go, oh, right. So when it says chayav, he's liable, it doesn't mean to the death penalty. It means
sacrifice. Yeah.
He has to bring a korban chatat, a sin sacrifice.
The example I gave is the Torah tells you that eating pork is forbidden. The Torah doesn't tell you that eating human flesh is forbidden, right? Especially because it's not derech achila. Like to do such a thing, like that's not something you bring a sacrifice for.
He has a whole section on it in the book, in Sheva Mitzvot, where he talks about the prohibition of eating human flesh, and the question for a Noahide perhaps is maybe there's some debate on it, but it's an interesting chapter. And in English, this book is called The Divine Code. For those who want to read it, it's translated in English as The Divine Code, and I highly recommend it. Because
I can't imagine they translated with the notes and stuff. Does it?
I was wondering about that, and I'm not sure to what degree they translated the notes, because the notes are so scholarly.
And sometimes, I mean, there was one note I was reading page after page.
Yeah, these notes go on for page. For a person who can't read Hebrew, which means he's not a scholar he's not a Jewish scholar, to digest the discussion in the notes would be like totally futile. So
yeah,
I also, when I read the notes, I'm like, this can't be in the translation, because it just
I haven't seen the translation.
The English audience, the English readership, wouldn't know what to do with this. So that may be, but even so, but what I wanted to say was, speaking of Gemara, right? So this very well. Whenever the Gemara discusses an idea that is logical, okay, or I'll say it differently, the Talmud will challenge, because it's all about asking questions, all about challenging. The Talmud will challenge a verse in Torah. With what challenge? What will the Talmud challenge a verse with, Jacob? We'll say if the verse is stating something that could be inferred through logic.
My salkadaitach?
Close. It says, Lama li kra.
Lami like yeah.
Lama likra. What are the next two words?
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Svarahi.
Svara,
Lama
okay.
likra. Svarahi. That means I'm going to translate for your audience.
Yeah.
Why do I need a verse? It is logical.
Yeah.
Anything that is logical
Yeah.
does not require special revelation. I don't need God to reveal to me. So you can say the Torah requires me in this precept, right? And the Torah requires me. I'm already required because I'm a human being. I'm not an animal. I have a brain. I know how to think. Why would I, like you said, lama makasalka daitach? I forgot what he said, but your answer was basically, why would you even think of such a thing?
Yeah.
Right. So that's a variation, but it's like, if it's logical, why is God telling me this? And therefore, the Talmud will say, rather, it's coming to tell me, and it will extend the meaning of the verse to something that I might not have logically concluded, or that I may have said a way to sort of excuse it away logically. And the Gemara says the verse is there to tell you, no, even this also applies. So we always extend the meaning of a, so to speak, logical command beyond its obvious meaning, because we have a presupposition. Just God wouldn't waste his time, waste ink, waste space on the page, commanding us something that we could infer with our own logic.
Yeah.
So the idea is that logic is obligatory in a legal sense, even if it's not punishable in court. So when we talk about Noahide laws and things like that, a lot of things that are just rational, sensible, are become either obligatory or certainly we would say recommended or discouraged based on logical inference. So some of these activities that we were discussing earlier could fall under this: promiscuity,
Also, I mean,
homosexual behavior, even if the law doesn't command it, but this commands it.
It's very important to recognize. Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned as far as the Noahide. So when Jonathan he was in New York, so he met up with a friend of mine in 770 because he wanted to formally accept the Sheva Mitzvot, and he doesn't live near Orthodox Jews, and so he was in New York, and I set him up, and he met up with my friend, and my friend did a ad hoc rabbinic court and accepted his thing, right? And so the question became, what's the nusach? And I told him to say the 13 anima means, right? And you're like, what do you mean? Like, you're telling me a Hindu might just be a Noahide? And it's like, well, no. I mean, I would like all of India to come before a rabbinic court and recite the 13 principles of Jewish faith and believe in them, obviously. But the question is, what is the bare minimum, as opposed to what is a good thing that somebody should do?
So I have to just say this, I'm going to drop off, which is, so the video that I'm publishing Sunday, this was my address at the Noahide conference hosted by Beinenu in Dallas, on the topic of, as the title says, finding meaning along the Noahide path. Okay. And I discussed there the very wide application of the Noahide laws to a person's life, much broader than is typically thought. In other words, people have this very minimalist attitude towards the mitzvot b'nei Noach, that they're basically nothing. And it's sort of like 6:13 verses 7, and it just sounds really pathetic, right? So I'm going to explode that in this lecture. Now, in the Q&A, which I did not include in this video, but I was contemplating whether to publish the Q&A separately, because there was a Q&A right after.
You should publish it.
So I may publish the Q&A, but I'll just give you a taste, because now that you're saying what you're saying, I want to publish at least this question and answer, because it's to this point. Somebody asked me about the Druze in the land of Israel, which I didn't know, but I looked into it afterwards. They told me the Druze, maybe they claim to be, or legend has it or something, that they are the descendants of Jethro.
Yeah,
right?
that is
we have in the Tanakh, in many places, referenced this tribe in the land of Israel that were the descendants of Jethro. They're mentioned a whole bunch of places. The thing is, our perspective from the tradition, and this is what I answered her, is that Jethro converted to Judaism and his children were full converts. That's why we have the children of Jethro on the Sanhedrin, and Jeremiah talks about. I forget which chapter it is, 20 something. He talks about the Bnei Rechav, the children of Rechav, who were, that Rechav was an individual in this tribe, and this group of Jethro descendants, or this particular family called the Bnei Rechav, they're called out in order to put into relief the difference between the Jews and the descendants of Jethro. And this is as a criticism to the Jews. He said, look how you Jews don't keep the Torah, and yet the Bnei Rechav who converted, they are more loyally Jewish than the biological descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this was the rebuke of the prophet, was look at the Bnei Rechav and look at you, right? So we know these people were there. So according to, if we would say, what happened to them, we don't know. But the Druze are claiming to be essentially this group. So if that's true, that means that ironically, at some point in the future, they converted to Islam, because the Druze self-identify as Muslims, although the Shiites and the Sunnis would have them all killed, because the Shiites think the Sunnis are heretics, and the Sunnis think the Shiites are heretics, and they all agree that the Druze are heretics, meaning the Druze they are an offshoot of Islam, but their version doesn't comport with the Sunni or the Shiite, which are the more mainstream.
And even the tolerant Shiites and Sunnis, which tolerate each other, don't tolerate anybody outside of each other.
That may be. I'm not a scholar of Islam, so I don't want to say too much more on that. But the Druze today self-identify as Muslims. So she asked me, this was her follow-up question, was are they considered Noahides? Right? Are they considered Noahides? So I answer this question, but I won't tell you what my answer is, because I'm not publishing it yet.
Let me tell you that several Druze leaders have actually gone before rabbinic courts and accepted the Noahide laws.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I didn't know that, and that's good information to have. I'd like to have a source for that. But basically, what I said was basically exactly what you said a moment ago, which is that, and it's what we've been saying all along. It is a matter of scholarly debate, the degree to which a Noahide has to conform in both belief and practice to certain strictures. Do they have to believe identically to Jews like Maimonides would more or less require? Are the requirements very specific, or sort of within the 7 law framework, which are kind of like 7 concepts within that conceptual framework? If what they do can fit conceptually, does it need to be super specific or not? Is a matter of scholarly debate, to the point, like you said, on the extreme, that you might even say a Hindu is a Noahide because they are not polytheistic but henotheistic, which means, and it's true, that they believe that there was one source, one unified source of all power, and that power comes into the world through these channels, and the channels are accessed through the worship of these images, right? So that the worship of the images, they do attribute deity to them. Let's not fool ourselves. They do attribute divinity to these symbols, these images, which correspond to beings that they believe in that are gods. Yes, but those gods are not ultimate gods. They are not powerful on their own. Their power derives from a unified source of all power, and they believe that they cannot access that unified source without these intermediaries. So these are intermediary gods. So that means that they essentially believe in a unity, but it's a divided unity.
And
right?
I have to say, Rabbi Steinsaltz specifically pointed out that we talk about Hinduism, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of versions of Hinduism.
Well, there are millions of Hindu gods. There are literally millions of Hindu gods.
Not just the gods, but like there's different regional versions, and different people believe different things.
Right.
And part of what he was saying in that article was it's certainly possible that individual Hindus have certain beliefs and they go along with practices, but they themselves might be considered Noahites.
So that's interesting. So there may be some versions of Hinduism that are even more in conformity with monotheism. So that may be the case. But my point is, even if you want to go to the extreme, is it possible? Is it conceivable? It may be, but that would be an extreme view that certainly would not be embraced by the majority of scholars.
And Rabbi Steinsaltz only brought it up as a
theoretical.
Yeah.
And Maimonides certainly would reject that. And when we say Maimonides is not alone. Maimonides is like a whole school of scholars. Is like the Maimonides. He's just the king of the school, the Maimonidean school of scholars. So many Rishonim, many of the medieval commentators, authorities, if you will, scholars who follow the Maimonides lead on this. So, or even if they're not following his lead, agree with him. So the Maimonides would really seem to be more the mainstream of scholars.
The big question on that is, we know that we as Jews are commanded on Michshol regarding Gentiles.
That's right.
Right. So we are commanded not to in any way assist a Gentile in any sin, certainly the sin of idolatry. So if you are holding, the fact is, halachically, we have certainly people who've been living in Christian lands have not been treating Christianity like pure idolatry in terms of being very careful on Michshol so practically. So this is the
okay,
thing.
so let me tell you a story. I don't know if this story is true, but I believe I'm not sure how well it can be verified, to be honest, but it's an incredible story. And it was told to me by Rabbi Noach Orlowick, with whom you may be familiar. He taught in Orla Gola, and I think that's where I heard this from him. But the story is said over from Rabbi Abraham J. Twersky, whom you may be familiar with, who's no longer alive. But I feel like if Twersky said it, it's probably can be confirmed somewhere. I don't remember whether or not I personally confirmed it. You will love this story, Jacob.
Okay.
You will love this story. Love it.
Okay.
A fellow comes, and if you heard it, you could stop me, but maybe your audience wants to hear it. Rabbi Twersky, for those who don't know, Rabbi Dr. Many Rabbi Twerskys, Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twersky, who's authored many books. It was a psychologist and an psychiatrist, and an addictions counselor, and he, helped many people with addiction. One of them was a Catholic, and the Catholic was an alcoholic, and Rabbi Twersky helped to cure him of his alcoholism. And the man said to Rabbi Twersky, I have a big problem. As a Catholic, I have to, at Mass, I have to drink the wine, which is whatever. I don't even want to repeat what it's supposed to be. He says, or I go to hell.
Mm.
But I'm not allowed to drink a drop of wine as a recovering alcoholic. I'm not allowed. So what do I do? And he says, so you drink grape juice. So the guy says, grape juice, but grape juice isn't wine. He says, according to our great rabbi, somebody wanted to know who's the Pope in Judaism.
Yeah.
So that was the second story I wanted to tell you afterwards. But the person I'm about to mention was maybe the closest thing to a Pope in Judaism certainly in the United States or in his generation. He says, our great rabbinic authority of the day, Rabbi Moses Feinstein, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, has ruled that grape juice, commercial grape juice, is an acceptable substitute for wine in matters of religious law. Okay, so the guy says, "Okay, I need to speak with my parishioner about this."
Priest,
So he goes to his priest or whatever, and he says, "Can I use grape juice?" And it says, "Grape juice? I never heard of this before." So he tells him, "My doctor is an Orthodox Jew, and he says that their rabbi says that you can use grape juice." So the priest says, I don't know. I'm missing a piece of the story. A piece of the story was that Rabbi Twersky translates for this fellow the responsum of Rabbi Feinstein, who was very famous for his responsa. He translates the responsum where he explains why grape juice is an acceptable substitute for wine in religious ceremonies. He translates it and he gives it to the fellow. So he brings it to his priest, says, here's the responsum from the rabbi. And he looks at it and he goes, I can't rule on this. It's not within my authority. I have to send it to the bishop.
Yeah.
So he sends it to the bishop, and the bishop looks at it and he says, I can't rule on this. I need to send it to the archbishop. So he sends it to the archbishop. The archbishop says, I got to send this to the cardinal. He sends it to the cardinal, and the cardinal says, I need to bring it to the Pope. He brings it to the Pope, and the Pope writes a letter where he says, after review of the responsum of Rabbi Moses Feinstein, it is my opinion that grape juice may be substituted in the Mass ceremony in place of wine, right? And this letter goes to the cardinal, who gives it to the archbishop, who gives it to the bishop, who gives it to the priest, and the priest allows the guy to have grape juice, and we saved him from hell, right? But so I always thought that story is a phenomenal story. But what disturbed me later about the story is here we are being misayeh, as you said. Here I am aiding and abetting the worship of idolatry.
Yeah.
So I said, therefore I became skeptical of the story. Like I said, I never went and confirmed it.
I'm trying to find it. I
But
tried.
if the story's true,
Yeah.
it seems that according to Rabbi Twersky, who furnished this responsum to his person and said, yeah, go ahead, right? That maybe Rabbi Twersky was proceeding on the presumption that was proceeding on the presumption that this may not be idolatry for a Noahide.
Right.
Okay?
So I just
story.
want to introduce you to Daniel Shalom. Daniel Shalom.
Oh, Daniel Shalom went to yeshiva.
Yes.
And then he went and he
Taurus Moshe.
Then he went and made a shidduch with someone who we wouldn't have recommended for him. and he's gonna return to the fold in the next chapter.
Well, Daniel Shalom, he's pretty much a from Yid, except sometimes he goes places I wouldn't necessarily recommend where I met him. But he's a from Yid. He's a from Yid. And he's a Talmudic scholar, and I've been trying to get him.
Oh, this isn't the guy you told me. This isn't the guy you told me who went and he intermarried or something.
No.
Okay, so I was thinking I thought this was a different guy who was on the stream one time.
No.
All right, never mind. Please forgive me for casting any.
No. Daniel Shalom. Where I met him, I won't say where I met him, but I was not expecting to meet a student of Ner Israel and Torres Moshe where I met him. But go ahead and
Last
tell your
story,
story.
and then I
But
gotta
I have a Baal Shem Tov story I have to tell you.
So it's Erev Shabbos, so I
But it's
I
a
have
Baal
some-
Shem Tov story.
okay. So my story, your story, and then I go bye. Okay, you're gonna like this story. This story I heard from Rabbi Jermaine Zechrayna Livracha, who taught in Or Sameach. The truth is that I think he just used to learn in the base medrash. Maybe he was like a Sholem Eshev or something. But when there was a period of time when I was in the shir in Or Sameach of Rabbi Naftali Kaplan. Do you remember Rabbi Naftali Kaplan?
Sounds familiar.
Not David Kaplan, Naftali Kaplan. He taught one of the shiurim in the base medrash, and then he's eventually retired from that. I was the last class he taught. Okay, our shir, our group, was his last group at Or Sameach. He said it was his best group. Hashem gave him a big matana, a big gift that before he stepped away from his position in Or Sameach, that he had the best zman, the best period of learning with a group of guys that he said the learning was incredible. He enjoyed it so much. He said it was the best group he ever had. Now this was a long zman. It was a winter zman when we had an extra month. It was an Ibriyar, so we had an extra month. And he only, rather than 6 months, he stayed for 5 months and then he left. And the last month we had to get a new Rebbe. So I won't tell you the long story, but we went through a couple of candidates before we were happy. We ended up with Rabbi Jermaine, Zechrayna Livracha. He told this story, okay? He said that, how does this story go? Yeah, so Rav Elyashiv, for your viewers who don't know, Rabbi Yosef Shalom Elyashiv was among the greatest scholars, righteous men, and decisors of Jewish law that lived in the 20th century and into the 21st century. He died around 2010. Okay, but at this time he was still alive when we heard this story. Okay, and he said, so Rav Elyashiv was very elderly. He lived to be over 100 years old, and maybe like 102, something like that. 101, whatever it is. He lived to be over 100. He was very elderly, and as older people do, he had health problems. Now, in one of his health conditions, he needed to have a very delicate operation, and the only way to do it is he had to fly to the United States of America, and there was one doctor in the whole country who could perform this operation. And I don't remember his name. Maybe I never knew his name, but this is the way the story goes. So Rav Elyashiv comes in, and he has an aide, what we call a shamish, right? He has an aide. These great rabbis, they always have an aide. There's somebody who just arranges all their affairs for them, so these great rabbis can do their great rabbi thing without worrying about logistics. So the guy who's driving him and he's making all the phone calls and all the arrangements, it's his aide, his shamish. So he has the shamish who's going everywhere, doing everything, interpreting, speaking, calling, writing, signing, doing everything. And he's always running around like a chicken with his head cut off. And he's following Rabbi Elyashiv everywhere. He's with him before, during, after every step of this procedure. And the doctor, the surgeon, who's not a Jew, and he comes from some little town in the middle of nowhere in the United States, he sees this fellow just pouring his blood, sweat, and tears into the rabbi's well-being. So at one point, he takes the man aside and he says to him, I just got to know, how much are they paying you for what you're doing? He says, paying me? I don't take a salary for what I do. He says, you don't get a salary? He says, so why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? So the guy, imagine, here's a Jew from Jerusalem, probably met 5 non-Jews in his whole life. Okay, he's trying to figure out, how do I explain this to the American non-Jewish person who Rav Elyashiv is? So he says, let me ask you something. He says, if somebody asked you to perform an operation on the Pope, that's what he said to him. It's like, the Pope. He said, would you take a penny for it? Right? So I don't remember what the guy's answer was, because most Americans are not Catholics and they don't regard the Pope necessarily in such high regard. But I think it came across like the degree of the stature he was trying to communicate of who this person is, right?
Yeah.
So the guy's like, I understand. And I think in the end, I don't remember if he ended up charging for the procedure or not, or waiving the fees. I can't remember if that was part of the story. But what is the punchline of the story is that after it was all over, the local newspaper of this person's hometown, which was some small town in middle America, that had very few things to boast of. But one thing it could boast of was it had this great famous surgeon, right? So they wrote up an article, they interviewed him, and they wrote up this article in the paper about this particular thing. And they said that they were touting how proud they were of Dr. So-and-so. He performed this very delicate surgery on Rabbi Yosef Shalom Elyashiv, who is the equivalent of the Jewish Pope. That's what it said in the newspaper, the equivalent of the Jewish Pope. So somebody wanted to know who's the Jewish Pope. The truth is neither Rabbi Moshe Feinstein nor Rabbi Elyashiv are still living today. Were they living today? Again, Rabbi Moshe was like the American Pope. Lahavdil Elef Alfei Abdalos for the Jews, and Rabbi Elyashiv would have been Lahavdil, the equivalent of the Jewish Pope in Israel. Today, I don't know that we have anyone that we could
We have the Yanuka.
Listen, I love the Yanuka.
Have you been listening? Have you been listening to his shiurim?
No.
No.
Respect
Until
him.
you listen,
I respect him.
until you listen to the shiurim,
okay,
you will not.
I don't disagree with you. I don't
Yeah.
disagree with you. I really don't. I
Yeah.
respect the Yanuka. I revere him as a great scholar in as much as I'm aware of him. But I'm telling you, the only reason I know he exists
Me
is
too.
because the Christian anti-Semites can't stop talking about how he's the Antichrist and that the
Right.
Jews think he's the Messiah. And I'm like, I never heard of this guy. I'm an Orthodox rabbi. All day, I spend all day, every day in an Orthodox community, communicating, talking to, interacting with Orthodox Jews, and not once did I ever hear any of them mention one word about this guy, the Yanuka.
I agree with you.
So
I
it's
agree
all
with
in the
you.
imagination of the insane Christians.
Yes.
I don't mean that Christians are insane, but the
Yes.
insane ones.
Yes.
And so therefore, let's just put into perspective. After looking into him, because I was like, what are they even talking about? Okay, it turns out there is such a person. He is a great prodigy. He's a great genius. He's a great scholar. He seems to be a wonderful human being, like really just a cream of the crop human being, and a very humble person, which is probably the reason why he's not in everybody's face, right? And maybe that's all a testament to his greatness. But the bottom line remains that he is in the broader Orthodox world. He is not yet viewed as
He's
someone
only 36.
who's on the caliber of the so-called giants of the generation.
He's only 36 years old.
I'm aware. I think he's great,
Yeah.
and there's a lot that could be said, but I still would hesitate to begin to put them on a similar pedestal with the Gedolei Hador, the
Of
giants of
course,
the generation.
but-
Not
okay.
yet. Not
Okay,
yet.
Rabbi
And by
Mullen,
the way,
Rabbi Mullen, just listen to one of his shiurim. He blows you away. But
I don't
I want
doubt.
to quickly tell this story because Hasidim have a segula that if you tell a Baal Shem Tov story, Motzei Shabbos,
Oh,
it's supposedly a segula for Parnasa.
hold
and-
on.
Yeah.
I hear my phone ringing, and I don't know where it is.
If you have to go, you have to go.
I don't know if I have to go. How quick is your story?
Pretty quick. So,
All right, go.
the Rebbe said, "Lav davka Motzei Shabbos, lav davka Parnasa, and lav davka the Baal Shem Tov." Right. So the story is the Baal Shem Tov was taking a carriage from one city to another, and in the middle of the way, he says to the carriage driver, "We have to go home. We have to go home. I forgot something." So the carriage driver drives him back to his house, and he says, "I changed my mind. I don't want to go." So the carriage driver is wondering what's going on. Why aren't you like? And he keeps on asking, like, what happened? Why won't you? And finally, the Baal Shem Tov tells him, and this is a story that's told a lot. The Baal Shem Tov finally tells him, whenever we pass the church, Christians cross themselves, but you didn't cross yourself. And I saw like we passed 2 churches, you never crossed yourself. And I thought, this person, he doesn't believe in God, he might just kill me. He might like rob me. And the guy was flabbergasted. He said, "Yeah, I was going to rob you."
So what are you bringing out? That really it's better to be a Christian
Than to be an atheist.
To be an atheist, because at least then you have the fear of God and a belief in a higher moral power.
Yeah, and this is one of the stories of the Baal Shem Tov that's actually pretty meyuchas. It's a well-known story.
I hear it. Listen, I hear it. I'm not putting my stempel on it. I'm not putting my seal of approval. But I hear there's an argument to be made. I have to go.
Okay.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi. And on Sunday, everybody go listen to his thing. Okay. I'm tired of talking. I think I'm just going to end this stream unless there was somebody definitely wants to say. Yes, that's a funny joke, Andrew. I doubt very many people get it. Where's this based midrash? Zach is back. For
Hello.
you, I'll stay. I'll keep on I'll streaming.
Yeah, I just wanted to say sorry for my phone dropping off. So
No, quite all right.
if you want to end the stream, you're welcome to. I'm
No. It's been great meeting you, and this has been a very fun stream. But like we were talking, what were we talking? We were talking about speaking in tongues.
Yes, yeah. We'd gone on to authority and Noahide stuff, but
Right.
that was really interesting. I managed to listen to a lot of that on another device while my phone was starting back up. That was good actually. I think it was divinely ordained because I needed to go and prepare my spare room while listening rather than.
It's all divinely ordained. This is one of the finer points of Jewish theology, which is we may decide what we want to do, but it's God's decision what actually happens. So once something happens, it's the best thing that could have happened because God creates the world in the best way possible. So given the circumstances, while we don't understand why what happened is the best thing that could have happened, the fact is God is outside of time. And so he arranges us to be where we need to be. So the big question becomes, you go to a liquor store and a robber comes in at that moment to rob the liquor store, and God forbid he kills you. So was it ordained that you would die? There's that robber, right? He had, at any moment, he had the choice whether or not he was going to rot. So the fact is, ultimately, yes, it is ordained how long we're going to live by God. But God sees all of the pieces from outside of time, and he's arranged this mosaic in the perfect manner so that it will come out to be the greatest story.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's the traditional Christian perspective too. I remember actually when I was an atheist and I was an atheist philosophy student.
Okay.
We did a course on the rationalist philosophers. So this was like the string of Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and then ending in Kant.
Okay.
And I wrote an essay about Leibniz's famous maxim that this is the best of all possible worlds. And he derives this through pure reason of, if God exists and the principle of sufficient reason that he defines is true, then this is the best of all possible worlds. And I remember arguing as an atheist, if he's right, if God exists, then yes, this argument is flawless. And I still think that his argument is flawless.
And now you believe in God.
And now I believe in God, so yeah.
So tell me, how did you get from an atheist philosophy student to believing in God?
I stopped being an idiot. At least a little bit. It was through studying philosophy, specifically through in my master's degree. I had someone on my course. His name's Ryan Miller, and he was a Catholic friar, a Dominican friar, American, who had taken simple vows and then not taken solemn vows. So that means that he was in a novitiate. He was there for a certain number of years, vowed to be there, and then didn't take solemn vows to spend the rest of his life as a friar. And his next step after leaving.
You cut out.
Oh, where did I get to?
No, just that very last end. I didn't hear. Okay. You said so he took simple vows, and then
he took simple vows, and then he came and did a philosophy master's degree at St Andrews University in Scotland.
Okay. So he was somebody. You're one of your classmates, not.
Yeah, he was. Okay. But he was also about 15 years older than me, and a lot more life under his belt, a lot more reading under his belt. And he introduced me to the Catholic philosopher Bernard Lonergan, who is very dry. No one's heard of him, and then the people that have heard of him say, "Oh yeah, I've got him on my shelf somewhere." I didn't really get on with him. So I can never find anyone to actually get excited about him like I was. But he gave me this, but I'd fallen into complete nihilism, theoretical nihilism, because no one can actually practically be a nihilist. But theoretically, I believed that everything was relative, nothing really mattered, and it was slowly destroying my life. Because
it's poison. It's poison.
That it's a universal acid. Burns through everything. And he said, "Oh no, I've got the perfect book for you. That'll fix it." And he gave me Bernard Lonergan's Insight. Recommended that I read Bernard Lonergan's Insight, which gets to a point. It's called A Study of Human Understanding.
So this guy sounds like a really wise, great mentor. Like, what happened to him?
Fantastic. That's why I gave his full name. Just give him his full credit. He's absolutely brilliant.
What does he do now?
He lectures. Oh, he's doing a PhD, but he also
Okay.
lectures and does all sorts of bits and publishes papers in
Okay.
theology. He's at the University of Geneva at the moment.
Wow.
And I bumped into him on YouTube. I ran into a YouTube video of him debating Bo Branson, the
Oh
who's
yeah,
the
and yeah,
Hello.
Bo Branson, he's the expert on monarchical Trinity.
Yeah, and he was trying to take down Bo Branson's monarchical Trinitarianism with Aquinas.
Okay,
And I agree with Bo rather than Ryan on that one.
I'm glad.
But he did a very good presentation. He did a very good presentation.
I'm gonna have to get this Ryan on my channel. He sounds like a really interesting guy.
If you reach out to him, he probably would.
Okay.
So yeah, I read this book, and I got
So
out
what
of
convinced you?
I got out of the nihilism.
Okay, but what was the argument that
Well, it's the same that gets anything out of any remedy to global skepticism comes down to showing you that you're not actually a skeptic, showing you that you're not actually a complete nihilist, latching onto the thing that you won't actually get rid of, and building it back up.
Yeah.
And that's what it did for me in terms of it's basically just Aristotle's argument. Aristotle has this treatment of getting the skeptic to talk. Is that if you actually believe that you don't know anything,
yeah.
your only recourse is silence.
Right. And that's what I tell people who advocate for skepticism is I tell them, okay, if we can't know anything, why are you talking? Shut up.
That you've made an argument for skepticism, you've refuted skepticism.
Yeah.
Because you've decided the argument is valid. Like you've got this logical train that has led you there. So that's all that was shown to me. Really basic stuff. As I said, I was an idiot.
So Emma says Bishop Barron talks about Lonergan.
He does. Bishop Barron does. I got so excited when I saw Barron had a reading of it at one point, and it had Lonergan's insight on it, and I was so excited. So Bishop Barron is the stealth way of getting Lonergan into the mainstream. But I kept reading, and this book eventually goes on to say that the very structure and pattern of our thought leads to God. And it's a kind of broad sketch of a kind of Catholic version of the philosopher's God. So certain properties that would be ascribed to a kind of classical theist understanding of God, very Thomas. And I was kind of convinced that this chain works. I still kind of am convinced that this whole chain of argumentation worked. And I went for lunch with Ryan and said, I think I believe in God now. Not quite sure what to do with that. Can you tell me what to do with that?
Yeah, like okay, so that was the start of your journey. So I'm guessing he told you to go to a Catholic church.
No, he didn't.
Oh,
He introduced a concept that is so helpful. I've used it with other people as well. Massively important concept that Lonergan has of major authenticity and minor authenticity. That you want to be authentic to the truth. You want to be majorly authentic. That's the thing you're aiming at.
yeah.
And he says, in order to get there, you have to practice minor authenticity. You have to practice authenticity to something. So not being self-contradictory, lining up your thoughts with your actions, follow a way, and let that feedback loop keep going. See where that takes you. Feed it back. See where that takes you. Nope, feed it back.
Yeah. It's the step by
So I just
step.
went- So he
Yeah,
went with like go somewhere, follow something,
Yeah.
and see where it takes you. And I kind of thought it would eventually make me a Catholic,
Hmm.
and it didn't. So I went to what I knew growing up. So I
Okay.
went to the local Anglican church.
Okay.
Because my dad he's just retired, a Church of England vicar.
Oh,
So
you're a vicar's son.
I
No
was
wonder
vicar's
you're an
son.
atheist.
Exactly. They go one of two ways. They're either insufferable religious freaks or edgy teens. And I've now done both quite successfully. So I just went with what I knew.
Mhm.
And that in Scotland meant going to the Scottish Episcopal Church,
Right.
which is it has some differences from the Church of England. Notably, it moved a lot faster and has moved a lot faster on some of the progressive liberalizations of doctrine and practice. So the Scottish Episcopal Church voted for gay marriage in 2017, for instance. The Church of England still doesn't allow gay marriage, but is kind of doing this weird thing of
Blessing them.
trying to fudge it as much as they can and trying to keep everyone on board at the moment. Yeah, that's not really working, but so it was already a different space to what I grew up with. And it's also, I grew up in a kind of evangelical Anglican church,
Okay.
which it's not the same as what you might think of when you hear evangelical, because evangelical in the Church of England context is like it's still focused around the Eucharist and it's still got a liturgy. It's just a bit loosey-goosey and people will speak in tongues sometimes.
Okay.
So it's just a bit of a weird mash.
Trey dragged me to this local Anglican church, which you had to dig really, really deep to find out that they're actually an Anglican mission.
Yeah.
Right. I forget what they're called, but I'm the type of person, I'm like, no, I need to know like who these people are, right? I think it's called the Vine or something. Anyway, I dug really deep and then I found out, oh, they're Anglican and they're hiding it very well. That's
Because they want the money.
Never know. What?
They want the money. They don't want the branding.
Well, I mean, the pastor seemed
in a church that was called St. Paul's Church, like it was a normal, ordinary little parish church. But,
yeah.
Um,
So what happened? You decided this is being too progressive and
well, no, that's not really what happened, because so all I've been convinced of was like the existence of God in pretty broad strokes. Next up I went from that, it obviously, because of my upbringing, raised the oh yeah, like I was raised with all the stuff about Jesus. He seems like a nice guy. He seems to have things vaguely sort of right, so I'll try listening to what Jesus has to say about the God thing.
Okay.
Because that's where I came from, so that's what I'm going to reconnect with. And so this led me into the place which is I was more unorthodox than like everyone at this local Episcopal church, and that's saying something. If you've ever been to an Episcopal church or know some Episcopalians.
Like,
So
what do you
I
mean by that? Like, how were you unorthodox?
was, and I would never have affirmed the Nicene Creed.
Okay.
I would like believed that Jesus was a guy and the resurrection probably didn't happen. And then
I agree with
slowly-
you.
Wow, okay, yeah. But I slowly started to see some of this coming together.
Okay.
I got slowly convinced of the Trinity, for instance. I'm
God
sure you won't prove.
Stay on your soul. Okay.
And I started to slowly see the kind of the doctrines knitting together in a way that kind of led me to a point where I was more on par with the other people around me. And long story short, I got to a point where, as often happens with the vicar's kids who stay religious, is they follow in their father's footsteps. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next after I'd been working as a consultant doing a boring office job for about a year, and I quit it. And I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I needed to quit. And I kept asking God what I was supposed to do, and I had this comical pattern of every time I asked God what I was supposed to do, someone would come and tell me I should probably be a priest. It was over and over
Okay.
again.
Sometimes
But I
God
didn't
has to
notice.
knock it into you. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't notice until like at least 2 or 3 weeks of this happening. And
Yep.
me asking every night and every day, someone telling me I should be a priest, and me just blocking it out and going, no, definitely not. So I went to the priest of the church I was at, and she said,
Okay.
yeah, sure. We spoke about it, and
But you
I
didn't
was
go
put
to
on
your
the-
father? You didn't ask your father about it?
I told him I had started this process. After a while,
Okay.
I
Okay.
contacted him, but I'd entered onto this. They call it the vocational discernment process.
Right.
in School of
Yeah.
Episcopal Church, which is basically having lots of long conversations about how you're really feeling.
Mm.
Can you draw a picture of that? No one actually asked me to draw a picture of that. Actually, no, someone did. I lie. Someone did actually ask me to draw a picture of it. But it was fine, and I was going through this. But the whole way through, the same process that had been happening was still happening. Things were still knitting together. And I got to a point where I was kind of more orthodox than everyone around me now.
Mhm.
And like, this is still sort of small O, but I had, been in the YouTube pipeline of the Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Peugeot, Lord of Spirits.
Mm.
I'm starting to go in that direction. But what really had ticked me off a bit earlier than that was Paul Kingsnott. I don't know if you come across Paul Kingsnott.
I have. He speaks really low, and every video, like he's with Paul Vanderklay, like the sound is bad. I don't know why it is that, like, it's very rare to have a video where, and he's very
he lives with
different.
bad internet in the west of Ireland. So.
He's. I mean, this has been my hard part with Peugeot. While I am broadly supportive of a lot of their projects, like in a very real sense, they're symbolic world symbolism. Like every time Pajot, for instance, says the greatest story is the life of Jesus, like, to me, that's him admitting that he's an idolater. Because, like, how can the life of any human being be the greatest story? If that's the case, then just throw away the rest of your Bible, right? And just study the 4 Gospels, right? Because that's the greatest story. Why do I need to know the story of, like, anybody else? And then you get into this Christological reading of the rest of the Bible. You probably heard me tell this joke, but I have to tell it again.
Yeah. I don't think you said it.
the pastor goes to teach Sunday school, and he says, "What has 4 legs, lives in a tree, and stores nuts for the winter?" And none of the students raise their hands. So he asks Timmy, what has 4 legs, lives in a tree, and stores nuts for the winter? And Timmy says, "It sounds like a squirrel, but I'll say Jesus." And that's basically what Christians do with the entirety of the Bible, right? David and Bathsheba, it's a prototype of Jesus. Right? Like, how is David and Bathsheba a prototype of Jesus? But I'm sure I'm sure there's a Christological reading of David and Bathsheba.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Christological reading for everything. But that's the point. Is that there's a Christological reading of everything.
Yeah, it's idolatry. When you decide to turn everything into, when you decide Jesus has to be the lens, it's just such pure and obvious idolatry that it's just mind-boggling that anybody actually participates in it.
I don't want to go on a kind of long rabbit trail on this, but I'll say this.
Yeah.
It would be idolatry if we were the ones doing it. But Jesus is the one who comes back from the dead, who appears to the disciples on the road to Emmaus and shows them the scriptures that are all about him.
So every time somebody says
and it relies on this.
Every time somebody says that, I ask them, why is the story of Doubting Thomas in the Gospels? Why include that story? None of us can actually touch Jesus and have him come. And so, like, the ascension of Jesus completely negates the supposed resurrection of Jesus. Because if the ascension is a good thing, then why do you need the resurrection anyway? Right? If Jesus is just going to be bodily assumed into heaven, first of all, why do you need the incarnation even? Right? Like, it's all it's post hoc, trying to, like, I realized the people who lost Jesus were heartbroken and they couldn't accept reality. And in a very real sense, I am happy about that, because my Bible, I would not be able to have this discussion with you. You would never have, the Torah would never have come into your hands without the whole Christianity mistake. Right? But again, I think you're stopping at Salt Lake City and you got to keep on going to New York.
I mean, that's what I say to you. But I'm gonna follow Paul Vanderklay's father's advice:
Yeah, which is.
pick your battles and not have a fight that won't go anywhere.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I was trying to think where I got to.
You were telling us you
Yeah, I was in the process. I was getting
Paul Kingsnorth. Yes.
Kingsnorth. That's okay. Yeah. Paul Kingsnorth had his conversion to Romanian Orthodoxy from his weird pagan ways, and I didn't think much of it. I was sort of introduced to him about the same time as that happened, and going, okay, someone's converted to a Christianity that I haven't really heard of. But along with my boss at the time at the consultancy, we were reading his essays, and I really got into his essay series on the Abbey of Misrule, his essay series on the machine. Very, very good series. He has intimated he's going to put it into a book, and I really hope he does, because it'll be very good.
I should pick up his books. That's probably what I should do.
His novels are very good. The Wake, especially his first book, is truly excellent.
Okay.
His trilogy of novels, or loose trilogy of novels. The Wake is brilliant. Beast is also brilliant. Alexandria starts to fall off a bit, and I think it's because he shoots really high, but he hasn't, like, he's writing it before he's become a Christian, but is also clearly becoming a Christian.
Okay.
And in The Wake and the Beast, it's below the surface enough that it's subconscious, so it just comes out in the story, and the story is really good. In Alexandria, it's like it's almost becoming too conscious, and he's fighting it at the same time, and so it doesn't quite have the same. The story doesn't smuggle itself in the same.
I wish I could just download books, because I have I have 4 books on just this table right now, and several other books that I am supposedly reading. And
I have 8 books on this table at the moment.
Yeah.
Another 4 over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. Yeah. And constantly adding more books. And Father Stephen is writing more books faster than I can read them.
I know. How does he do it? It's impossible.
So I heard
I'm looking forward to his book, Paul. I'm really looking forward to that.
Me too. He promised me he's going to send me a copy before it actually gets published. It was there's something here. I don't know what it is. And it's bothering me. Okay, I think I got it. But anyway, so he said he's going to give me a chance to comment on it before he actually publishes it. And because he has made several promises that I'm waiting for him to actually cash on. One of which is he wants to prove to me that Paul actually did study under Gamliel. And the only proofs he's been able to bring so far are from the disputed letters. And you can't do the whole, he had co-authors, that's why they're different things are different, and then be like, Paul must have studied under Gamliel, because this sentence is like, it's so difficult to actually bring any sort of evidence that Paul knew anything about Judaism. But the second thing is he promised to explain the beginning of Romans 7, which is the analogy of the wife with her second husband, whose first husband dies and she remarries. Like, it's such an obviously bad attempt at Talmudic logic. Like, a 9-year-old would get kicked out of a Talmud class for being that amateurish and childish. And it, like, so that's Romans 7. That's where he talks about that which I would do, I do not do, right? Which is some of the best writing in Paul, right? I did not see that, because every time I would open Romans 7, like, I would be so enraged. Like, it is such a, like, visceral, like, how dare you, like, take something so beautiful as Talmudic logic and then pass off this. And Father Stephen promises me that it's actually a problem of translation from the Greek. And
I mean, that's the case with so much stuff. So I all I can say with, I don't have Father Stephen's scholarly amazement, but one of the big parts of my journey of knitting all the doctrines together, there were two things: the Torah and Paul. Both of which I could be fine with, reading the Gospels and reading, like, the letter of James and, like, reading a whole bunch of the prophets was fine. I could do all that. The Torah and Paul tripped me up of things that I just, like, didn't and great with both of them.
Good. It should.
Yeah. And so I did then actually go and wrestle with it. And I remember seeing Paul the way that you talk about Paul. I remember seeing him like this. And
what changed your mind?
One, reading him in different translations and seeing how different the translations were. And seeing there's some skullduggery going on. When you look at how differently Paul gets translated in, like, the NIV and the ESV. And Paul is just a totally different character in both of them. Comes across like two totally different people. And okay, this is clearly a text that's difficult to translate. And actually reading him in the NRSV and the ESV, sitting with those words and seeing them in a new light, something in my mind started to shift about him. And the second component was Father Stephen. Was listening to Father Stephen exposit Paul, listening to his Bible studies on it, and going, whoa, okay, right. I see how this actually knits. I keep using that metaphor of knitting, that seeing it bind together. And the same thing for the Torah, again, with Father Stephen.
I mean, Paul within Judaism, new perspectives on Paul. This is something that I keep on emphasizing on my channel. It is internal Christian theology which motivates people towards new perspectives on, first new perspectives on Paul, and now into Paul within Judaism. In addition to the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the only problem I have is new perspective. I wish I could be actually convinced that New Perspectives of Paul is honest to him as opposed to a way of making sense of Paul without having him be purely blasphemous and idolatrous.
So part of the knitting for me was also a question of history. That I started out with this kind of basic idea that Paul had ruined Christianity. That there was this initial Jesus movement, as the scholars say.
That's what James Tabor says.
Yeah. That basically a kind of James Tabor way of looking at things.
Yeah.
And I kind of had this almost as an assumption going in. Actually, this is my starting point.
Mm.
And the more that I tried to actually make this historical narrative work, the more it just seemed to keep falling apart. And the reason for that was there's a lot of stuff that Paul doesn't have to argue for in his letters that everyone assumes, that everyone agrees on, that you wouldn't expect everyone to agree on.
What do you mean?
So one of the key things about my narrative going into it of Paul wrecked this thing is that Jesus is originally not considered divine.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that works. You've got, because of the amount of people that have to be fundamentally wrong that knew him. And the more I read, the more this list of people that had to have really quickly abandoned.
Okay, let me clear up something. Okay, let me clear up something that actually I think I cleared up for Father Stephen DeYoung as well. The idea that God is represented in man is not a Christian idea. It's Genesis 1. That human beings are meant to represent God in the world. That when we do God's will in the world, we are incarnating God, right? We don't like using this speech because Christians take it to a place where it is truly problematic, right? But part of what I've been trying to do is to stop reframing Judaism merely in order to prevent Christians, because I get Christians asking me, well, where is this idea of several very advanced ideas within Judaism, right? Believe that these ideas have been completely stripped out of Judaism. And the fact is that in a very real sense, they haven't, but because of the way Christians understand them, so we do not believe that Jesus on the potty, right, is a representation of God. God forbid. We don't believe that Moses on the potty is a representation of God. And there are no icons of Jesus going to the bathroom. Nobody ever created, hopefully, an icon of Jesus going to the bathroom. Jesus, in the sense that at those times which he did the will of God, and hopefully none of us are such horrible people that we never represent God in the world, right? At that moment, yes, he was an incarnation of godliness in the world. That's Genesis 1. That's not Christianity. Christianity goes wrong where it talks about Jesus as monogenes, talks about Jesus as the only begotten Son of God. And he is God in a way that all of humanity, the rest of humanity, is not. So it's not the divinity of Jesus that I have a problem with when it's described in that manner of divinity. And I believe what the early Christians saw him as a great rabbi, right? Who was actually a living, walking, talking representation of God in the world. The problem is when Christians turned him into the squirrel. Everything is about Jesus.
Yeah, what? Again, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of discussion. We're just not going to.
Okay, yeah.
But specifically, what I'm seeing
Mm-hmm.
in these early texts is this idea that Jesus is different in the sense that Paul is calling him Lord.
Mm-hmm.
This sense that all authority on heaven and on earth has been given to him. None of this, to me, removes the ability for us to incarnate God.
Mm-hmm.
Because we say what Christ is by nature,
Mm-hmm.
we can become by grace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the mistake. I think what Jesus was by nature is what you are by nature.
But I am not perfect and sinless.
Neither was he. I mean, you read the story of him making his parents worried about him when he was missing for 3 days. That's a sin right there.
That kind of argument you could spin around to say, you could start saying then that God was sinning when he sent the flood, right? You can start saying that God was sinning when he allows various natural disasters to happen. That's an atheist argument. That's not.
It's not an atheist argument, and I'll explain to you why. Because the text itself, right? The text itself, when we talk about God sending the flood and God's anger, right? That's the text. The Gospels view Jesus as a holy man in the way that Jewish text spoke of many people at the time, and in a sense sinless in the way that Jewish texts still talk about David. For example, Father Stephen brings there's the place where it says in the Bible that David was sinless, right? If you're elevating Jesus's sinlessness to a level of sinlessness so don't make icons of anybody else and go ahead and make icons of God the Father.
But Jesus is the icon of God the Father.
He's the icon of God the Father. He's the icon of God the Father. And this is how I justify Eastern Orthodox Christians, not monarchical Trinitarians, not being pure idolaters. Because the Hebrew temple, right? You have this beautiful structure, and there's the altars, and there's the incense, and there's the holy, and there's the Holy of Holies, and then there's the ark, and then there's the mercy seat, as Christians call it, right? Where in any other temple in the world, that's where your God is. You put the idol. That's where you put the idol. And the Jewish innovation, the Hebrew innovation was, you come into the Holy of Holies and there's no idol there. Until Christians sat Jesus on that mercy seat. Right? And there,
God revealed himself.
what?
God
No.
revealed himself. We didn't do it.
But in the Gospels, Jesus sits at the right hand. Like I was reading Father Stephen explaining Psalm 110, is it? Or the one where it says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until, right?
Yeah.
So like the schizophrenic God, right? It's incoherent to the Jewish understanding of God, which existed before Jesus. If you want to tell me that before the life of Jesus, Jews had no coherent way of understanding that psalm, why was the temple built in the way that it was? They should have put a cross there. Why didn't God put a cross there from the very beginning? Right? See, Father Stephen is trying very hard to make Eastern Orthodoxy be a continuation of God's revelation to Moses, which I'm very glad he's doing. But it's in no way convincing. It can't be. Because the fact is that the Jews didn't accept it. It was a bunch of Gentiles who didn't know better. And I'm glad that the Gentiles went from all their gods down to 3. I'm very glad that God helped them along the way down to 3 gods. Now just a tiny bit further, and you'll be there.
I am forced by circumstances to do Paul Vandeklay's dad. My phone is nearly dying again.
Okay.
Uh,
You're going to have to set up your computer so you can actually come on video.
There's not really anywhere we can go.
Okay.
I don't have a computer, but it's been great talking to you. I think
It has
my phone's
been.
probably about to die.
It has been.
Thank you so much for the chat. And I'm sure.
I really enjoyed discussing this stuff, and it's a lot of fun. So thank you for coming on, Zach. And
I'm starting to stutter, but I haven't.
Next time when you have a chance, you should jump on again. Did I lose you?
I
No,
will
you're still here.
endeavor to do so. Right. Thank you.
Great. Be well.
So,
Okay.
But yeah. Good night. I'm leaving with my own accord now.
Okay. Good night. I am going to end the stream. Good night, people.